Chapter 2250. Rectification Bang. The thunder fire sword slashed out once again. The terrifying thunder fire energy turned into an endless sea of thunder fire, filling the sky of Dub City. A terrifyingly high temperature filled the air of Dub City, and the surrounding air seemed to be distorted. Crack! Do Xian raised his long spear, wanting to block the sword. Unfortunately, the moment it came into contact with the divine sword, the long spear was broken into two, and Do Xian was smashed into the ground in an extremely miserable state. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face was pale. "Lord Shui, don't kill me. I didn't do it on purpose." Do Xian climbed up in a panic. His body trembled as he kowtowed to Zhuowen. Now, he was truly afraid. The divine sword on Zhuowen's body had already put him in such a difficult situation. Moreover, to put it bluntly, the terrifying power displayed by the Thunderfire sword was enough to kill him. As the owner of the two divine swords, one could imagine how terrifying Zhuowen's strength was. Therefore, at this moment, Do Xian was really afraid. He kowtowed and begged for mercy in order to live. Zhuowen slowly came in front of Do Xian. His right hand suddenly pressed down, and a surge of divine power poured out. Do Xian, who was kneeling on the ground and kowtowing, groaned and fell to the ground with his face down. "I won't kill you now." With that said, Zhuowen's right hand grabbed again, and the illusory sky bridge in Do Xian's body was pulled out. Then, with a pinch, the illusory sky bridge was instantly crushed into powder by Zhuowen. No, Do Xian looked at the shattered illusory sky bridge, and he was stunned on the spot. A bone-chilling coldness that he had never felt before spread throughout his body. Do Xian knew very well that he was completely finished. With the illusory sky bridge destroyed, he would forever be a cripple, and his lifespan would become extremely short. "Father, mother, I'll leave Do Xian to you," Zhuowen said to Zhuo Xiaotian and Feng Xiao before leaping into the air and hovering above the square. Zhuowen looked down at the entire Dub City. His vast aura crushed down without holding back. Instantly, all the cultivators in Dub City felt this terrifying aura. They trembled in fear and their eyes were filled with fear. "I, Zhuowen, have returned today. I heard that many people in Dub City are very dissatisfied with my father as the city lord. They want my father to step down and recommend Do Xian to become the new city lord. You are not satisfied with us Rika ruling over Dub City? Very well. Today, I, Zhuowen, will take back everything that I, Zhuowen, have given you. Dub City will be returned to you. As for the Ziwei Galaxy and all the resources I brought, I, Zhuowen, will take them all back." As soon as Zhuowen said this, all the cultivators in Dub City were in an uproar. One had to know that most of the cultivators in Dub City joined mainly because of the huge energy and rich resources of Dub City. But now, Zhuowen actually wanted to take back all these resources. In that case, wouldn't they be left with nothing? "Lord Shui, please don't. You are still our respected lord. Dub City needs you to be in charge again." Instantly, countless cultivators in Dub City knelt on one knee and begged Zhuowen not to take back the Ziwei Galaxy and resources. Unfortunately, Zhuowen turned a deaf ear to their pleas. He looked down at the crowd and sneered in his heart. None of these people were loyal to the Rika. They only valued the rich resources of the Rika, which could allow their cultivation to advance by leaps and bounds. But once something happened to the Rika, these people were the fastest to change sides. Since Do Xian took away Zhuo Xiaotian's position as the city lord, none of these people stood up for Zhuo Xiaotian. They didn't even say a word of justice. It could be said that in Dub City, except for the Rika, most of the people were cold-blooded. After experiencing these things, Zhuowen did not intend to set up Dub City here. He wanted to take back all the things he had given Dub City before. "Get lost." Zhuowen only said this sentence, and a powerful divine sense swept out in all directions like a tide, driving away all the cultivators in Dub City and even the Ziwei Galaxy outside Dub City. On Dub City and the surrounding planets, cultivators were involuntarily chased out of the planets by an invisible force. They were in an extremely sorry state. Most of the cultivators did not know what was going on. They looked at the planets they lived on in surprise. When they wanted to re-enter the planet, they found that an extremely powerful energy barrier had appeared on the surface of the planet, preventing them from entering the planet. What's going on? Why are we being driven out of the planet? Many cultivators were in an uproar. They did not know what was going on, but soon Zhuowen's voice rang in their minds. From now on, Dub City is Dub City, and the Ziwei Galaxy is the Ziwei Galaxy. I will take all the things that originally belonged to me, Zhuowen. All of you, get lost. As soon as this voice finished speaking, a huge black vortex appeared in the sky above Dub City in the center of the Ziwei Galaxy. An unprecedentedly terrifying suction force came from the black vortex, and the planets around Dub City were all sucked in by this suction force. In less than 10 breaths of time, the entire Ziwei Galaxy was sucked into the black vortex. Other than the black mass of cultivators who were driven out of the Ziwei Galaxy, there was only the lonely Dub City in the center. Countless cultivators around Dub City turned pale. They did not expect Zhuowen to be so ruthless as to take away the entire Ziwei Galaxy. After taking away the Ziwei Galaxy, Zhuowen came to the underground treasury of Dub City. This treasury was built under Zhuowen's orders. It was mainly to store the countless resources that Zhuowen had obtained from the Luo God Palace ruins. Zhuowen did not even bother to use the key to open the door of the treasury. He directly punched the door open and entered the treasury. With a wave of his sleeve, he stored all the resources in the treasury into Devao's inner world. Although there were so many cultivators stationed in Dub City over the past 10 years, and the consumption of resources was extremely huge, the resources that Zhuowen had obtained from the Luo God Palace were too much. Even though a lot of resources had been consumed over the past 10 years, it had only consumed 1/10 of the resources in the treasury. Chapter 2251. News from Mu Chunchuezhua Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, and a group of Rika clansmen gathered in Dub Square. When the Rika clansmen saw Zhuowen, they all knelt on the ground and shouted his name. Zhuowen waved his sleeve and helped the Rika clansmen to their feet. He said indifferently, "I will find another place in the far west to settle down in the Emperor Star system. But from now on, the Rika forces will continue to develop, but they must be strict in accepting new members. There is no need to take in any random stray cats or dogs. Those fellows will only bite their masters." As he spoke, Zhuowen glanced at the dazed Dou Xian who had been thrown to the side by Zhou Xiaotian and the others. At this moment, Dou Xian had nothing left to live for. The illusory heavenly bridge had been destroyed, and he had become a cripple. There was no difference between him and death. After Zhuowen finished speaking, the Rika clansmen all nodded in agreement. Zhuowen nodded, then said to Wudi, "Wudi, where is big brother Hantian now? Brother Zhuo, come with me. Hantian is in the conference hall." As Wu Dai spoke, she led Zhuowen to the conference hall at the top of the tower. Zhuowen carried Dou Xian and followed behind. After entering the hall, Zhuowen immediately noticed the weak Lu Hantian lying on the side. His eyes immediately turned cold. Zhuowen threw Dou Xian to the ground, causing him to grimace in pain. He then went to Lu Hantian's side. After examining him, he found that although Lu Hantian's injuries were serious, they were not life-threatening. Letting out a sigh, Zhuowen took out a drop of Heavenly Domain Starry Sky essence from his spirit ring and fed it to Lu Hantian. After taking the Heavenly Domain Starry Sky essence, the originally unconscious Lu Hantian immediately woke up. Lu Hantian sat up abruptly, and then he saw Zhuowen beside him. He couldn't help but ask in surprise, "Zhuowen? I'm not dreaming again, right?" Zhuowen smiled slightly. Seeing Lu Hantian's confused expression, he explained everything from beginning to end. Lu Hantian came back to his senses. He let out a sigh and slapped his forehead. "So that's how it is, your cultivation is really high now. You're already at the 6th Void Sky stage, and from the looks of it, you're even stronger than Dou Xian. I have to admire you." Zhuowen smiled, pointed, and pointed. "Hantian, brother, I brought the culprit. Since he was the one who seriously injured you, I'll let him deal with him. Hantian. Since he was the one who injured you, you. Lu Hantian patted Zhuowen's shoulder and said, "Good brother." After saying that, Lu Hantian came in front of Dou Xian. At this moment, Dou Xian's eyes were unfocused, and he didn't even look at Lu Hantian. He was still silently grieving. Lu Hantian lifted Do Xian, then turned to Zhuowen and said, Zhuowen, we'll see blood later. I'll take this guy out first, so he won't dirty the conference hall. Zhuowen nodded, and Lu Hantian carried Do Xian out of the conference hall. After a while, miserable screams came from outside. The blood-curdling screams continued for half an hour before coming to an abrupt end. Then, Lu Hantian came in from outside. Zhuowen knew that Do Xian should have been completely dealt with by Lu Hantian. Zhuowen, what do you plan to do next? It wasn't easy for Dub City to develop, and you're going to disband it just like that. Lu Hantian came in front of Zhuowen and said with a grin. Zhuowen smiled faintly and said, the strength of a force doesn't depend on the number of people. It depends on whether the people of the force truly rely on the force, and treat the force as their own home to develop. If the people of the force are all cold-blooded people who forget righteousness for the sake of profit, then I'd rather disband the force than continue to raise this group of vermin. Lu Hantian nodded. Ever since the news of Zhuowen's accident spread to Dub City, he realized that the cultivators of Dub City had gradually become arrogant. Especially Do Xian, he didn't even put the Riker and the city lord in his eyes. Especially when Do Xian forced Zhuo Xiaotian to abdicate. Other than the Riker, no one in Dub City stood up for Zhuo Xiaotian. Instead, they immediately respected Do Xian. From this, it could be seen that the cultivators of Dub City were all a group of people who changed their sails according to the wind. If such a person was accepted into a force, it would be a hidden danger. Then do you plan to not establish a force? Lu Hantian asked. Zhuowen shook his head and said, we still have to establish a force, and it has to be established in the name of the Long family. However, the conditions for accepting people must be harsh and strict. Otherwise, what happened in Dub City might happen again. Lu Hantian nodded and said, I know. In the following period of time, Zhuowen reorganized Dub City and left with the Riker. Regarding the matter of Mu Chunxue, Zhuowen asked Zhuo Xiaotian and Feng Xiao. At first, the two of them were hesitant, so Zhuowen didn't suspect anything. However, as time passed, he still didn't see Mu Chunxue. Zhuowen knew that something must have happened to Mu Chunxue. After settling the Riker on an uninhabited meteorite, Zhuowen finally met with Feng Xiao alone. Mother, what happened to Chen Shui? Zhuowen looked at Feng Xiao seriously and asked. Feng Xiao hesitated, but seeing the serious look in Zhuowen's eyes, she sighed and said, it's actually like this. After you left, Chen Shui, listening to Feng Xiao's story, Zhuowen's eyes became more and more strange and shocked. According to Feng Xiao, Mu Chunxue seemed to have a very strange energy hidden in her body. This energy didn't have any abnormalities at first, but instead helped Mu Chunxue speed up her cultivation. Originally, Mu Chunxue's cultivation was only at the Void Sky first step, but in just a few years, her cultivation soared all the way to the Void Sky fifth step. Later, Mu Chunxue's strength became stronger and stronger, and Feng Xiao couldn't see through Mu Chunxue's true cultivation at all. Although Mu Chunxue's cultivation increased day by day, Feng Xiao found that Mu Chunxue's temperament had become completely different from before, and she could be alienated from her. At that time, Feng Xiao didn't know why Mu Chunxue had become like this, so she planned to personally talk to Mu Chunxue. She wanted to let Mu Chunxue speak out her thoughts and not feel so uncomfortable in her heart. But who would have thought that Mu Chunxue's temperament would change so much that she would actually attack Feng Xiao, almost killing Feng Xiao? If it wasn't for Mu Chunxue suddenly showing mercy and leaving Dub City like a madwoman, Feng Xiao would have been a corpse by now. Moreover, when Mu Chunxue left Dub City, there was a lot of movement, but at that time, no one noticed Mu Chunxue's departure, let alone intercepting Mu Chunxue. After listening to Feng Xiao's words, Zhuowen's eyes were full of disbelief. There was no doubt that what Feng Xiao said was really incredible. But Zhuowen knew that Feng Xiao was his mother, and she would never lie to him about this kind of thing. It was just that Zhuowen felt strange. What happened to Mu Chunxue at that time? Chapter 2252. Entering waning and waning, Feng Xiao saw Zhuowen fall into deep thought. She opened her mouth, but did not say anything in the end. She knew that Zhuowen needed some time to calm down. Mother, are there no clues about Chen Shui? Zhuowen suddenly looked up and asked. Feng Xiao said with a bitter smile, when Chen Shui was too strong back then, and left without a sound. Even Do Xian did not notice Chen Shui's departure, so. Zhuowen knit his brows, but his heart was filled with shock. Dub City was protected by an array, so even if Zhuowen wanted to leave Dub City, it was impossible for him to do so without a sound. At that time, he would definitely touch Dub City's array. But Mu Chunxue was able to leave without a sound. Even a 7th stage void sky cultivator like Do Xian did not notice her and left. Just how strong did she need to be to do this? Chen Shui. Zhuowen suddenly took out the crystal ball that Magatama had given him. At this moment, the crystal ball was filled with images, and these images were the scenes of the battle between Great Brahma and the mysterious woman. When Zhuowen saw the mysterious woman's back in the images, he felt that this mysterious woman's back was very similar to Mu Chunshue's. But because this mysterious woman was too strong, being able to fight with a heaven domain master like Great Brahma, Zhuowen subconsciously felt that this mysterious woman could not be Mu Chunxue. But now that he heard Feng Xiao's words, Zhuowen looked at the mysterious woman's back in the crystal ball again. He found that this mysterious woman's back was too similar to Mu Chunshue's. Zhuowen's expression changed. The battle between Great Brahma and the mysterious woman had spread through the starfield, but in the end, Great Brahma had returned to Great Brahma Palace to enter seclusion, and the mysterious woman had disappeared without a trace. In short, the mysterious woman was definitely doomed. Why does the woman's back in the crystal ball look like Chen Shui's? Could she be Chen Shui? Feng Xiao also saw the mysterious girl in the crystal ball and couldn't help speaking in a soft voice. Zhuowen put away the crystal ball and said with a sigh, whether she is Chen Shui or not, I'm not clear on that. Mother, let's take care of Rika first. You don't need to care about Chen Shui's matters, just leave it to me. Feng Xiao looked at the determination in Zhuowen's eyes and nodded without saying anything. In the following month, Zhuowen led the Rika to wander around the Sea of Magnets, searching for a suitable location to establish their forces. Finally, they found an incomparably massive meteorite in the northern part of the myriad magnetic sea. Although the meteorite was overgrown with weeds and desolate, it was large enough. Zhuowen wasn't very picky. He had endless resources on him and could turn this barren meteorite into a prosperous area. It was only a matter of time. Under Zhuowen's leadership, the Rika settled down here. At the same time, Zhuowen took out the Emperor Star System from Devao's inner world and surrounded the meteorite. After doing this, Zhuowen spent a full 3 months in the periphery of the North Star System to set up the 9 revolving Samsara array. Zhuowen had seen the power of the 9-cycle reincarnation array in the Bone World's Bone Halberd tribe. This kind of array was truly terrifying. The most important thing was that once Zhuowen laid down the array, all the cultivators inside would be under his control. No one would dare to act recklessly. Unfortunately, Zhuowen's level of array Dao was limited. Even though the Beast Bone Array Disc greatly increased his array Dao, he could only lay down the 9-cycle reincarnation array to the 8th level. There was still a gap between it and the peak 8th level array that Sai Ling had laid down in the Bone Halberd tribe. However, the power of this array was enough. Even if a cultivator of the Void Sky 8 steps came to attack, Zhuowen would be able to withstand it without him. As for the powerful attacks of the Void Sky 9 steps, even if Zhuowen presided over it, it wouldn't last long. Fortunately, the 9-cycle reincarnation array still had room for improvement. When Zhuowen's array Dao improved in the future, he would be able to raise the level of the 9-cycle reincarnation array to the peak of the 8th level or even the 9th level. After dealing with the matters here, Zhuowen returned to the encampment and instructed Zhuo Xiaotian and the other Rika higher-ups. He also handed over the resources of the Luo God Palace to Zhuo Xiaotian before leaving. However, before he left, Zhuowen left Cao Tairan, Song Binhong, and Lu Manfeng to guard the Rika encampment. The 3 of them were of the Void Sky 7 steps and wouldn't be of much help to Zhuowen right now. Therefore, he didn't plan to keep them by his side. Moreover, the 3 of them were Zhuowen's slaves. As long as Zhuowen didn't die, the 3 of them wouldn't have any thoughts of betraying him. As Zhuowen's slaves, Zhuowen only needed to use his divine will to kill the 3 of them without a doubt. As for Zhong Ziqing, Di Ling, and Chen Changsheng, he brought them with him. Zhong Zicheng was originally at the peak of the Void Sky 7 steps and had enjoyed a lot of resources by Zhuowen's side. In addition, Zhong Zicheng's talent wasn't weak, so he didn't disappoint Zhuowen's expectations and broke through to the Void Sky 8 steps. After leaving the encampment, Zhuowen went straight to the waxing waning moons. This time, he went to the waxing waning moons to find the Calamity Crystal Vein. Although his clone had become the Thunder Fire True God, compared to an expert like Lord Brahma, it was still insignificant. However, as long as Devour survived the storm, Zhuowen believed that even if he wasn't Lord Brahma's match, Lord Brahma wouldn't be able to kill him. If the mysterious woman was really Mu Chunxue, Zhuowen naturally wouldn't let Lord Brahma go. However, he was still too weak right now. When his clone was stronger, he planned to go to the Central Universe and ask around. He knew that the Central Universe would have more information about the mysterious woman. Regardless of Mu Chunxue's whereabouts, Zhuowen knew the importance of strength right now. If the mysterious woman was really Mu Chunxue, Zhuowen would probably rush to the Lord Brahma Palace and find him to investigate Mu Chunxue's whereabouts. However, all of this required great strength. Zhuowen could only blame himself for being too weak right now. He was restricted everywhere. Outside the waning moons were huge asteroids, each of which had a temporary encampment set up by cultivators. There were many entrances to the waxing waning moons. Almost every entrance was guarded by a force. If one wanted to enter, they had to pay the corresponding amount of divine stones. When Zhuowen entered the waxing waning moons, it was because the Emperor Spirit and Yarrow Xiong knew of a secret entrance. Therefore, they didn't enter from other entrances. The Calamity Crystal Vein was a precious treasure for true gods, but it was of little value to Void Sky cultivators. Zhuowen inquired around and found that there were many Calamity Crystal Veins in the waxing waning moons. However, they were scattered around. Moreover, the amount of Calamity Crystal Veins was not fixed. If one was lucky, there might be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Calamity Crystal Veins. If one was unlucky, there might only be a few thousand Calamity Crystal Veins. Chapter 2253. Iron Islands. This brother, do you have a huge demand for disaster crystals? Suddenly, a young man with disheveled hair approached and asked softly when he saw Zhuowen asking about disaster crystal veins. Zhuowen turned to look at the young man with disheveled hair and found that the young man's aura wasn't strong, only around True God 1 Calamity. He asked with interest, "Do you know where there are abundant reserves of disaster crystals?" When Zhuowen asked about disaster crystals, he had already restrained his aura and only revealed the aura of a True God 2 Calamities. After all, if a Void Sky expert like him asked about disaster crystals, others would be suspicious. The young man quickly nodded and said, "Brother, come with me." After saying that, the young man brought Zhuowen to a huge meteorite nearby. "Brother, look over there. That group of people is from Iron Islands, and the man and woman in the lead are the children of the island master of Iron Islands. Their status is extremely noble," the young man said with a mischievous smile. "Iron Archipelago?" Zhuowen asked in surprise. "You don't know about Iron Islands?" Iron Islands is one of the most powerful rogue cultivator forces in the periphery of Cloudy Clear Round Irregular Region. They have a Void Sky expert guarding them and are in the limelight. The children of the 2 island masters of Iron Islands are very talented and are now True Gods 3 Calamities, the young man said as he looked at Zhuowen in surprise. The young man suddenly said mysteriously, "Yes, brother, you don't know. Although there are many places with disaster crystal veins in Cloudy Clear Round Irregular Region, if there is only one place with abundant reserves, then the disaster crystal veins are almost all gathered together. This place is called Disaster Canyon, but its location is very mysterious. In addition, there are many dangers inside. Even Void Sky experts have fallen, so very few true gods are willing to enter Disaster Canyon. Moreover, Void Sky experts don't have much demand for disaster crystals, so it's impossible for them to take risks inside. Therefore, this place has become very useless." Zhuowen's expression changed slightly and he asked, "Do you know the map of Disaster Canyon?" The young man shook his head and said, "I don't know. Disaster Canyon itself is quite a secret, and it's useless for Void Sky experts, so there are very few maps of Disaster Canyon. I heard that the young island master of Iron Islands accidentally obtained the map of Disaster Canyon, and he is gathering people to go to Disaster Canyon. The young man looked at Zhuoan round irregular region, and he looked God 3 calamities round irregular region said, Brother, is God 2 true God 2 round irregular region? Zhuoan glanced at the young man. This young man's cultivation wasn't very strong. He was only a true God 1 calamity round irregular region. He probably looked for Zhuoan because he wasn't confident in himself, so he wanted Zhuoan to join the group. After all, he had a friend who was a true God 2 calamities round irregular region. The Iron Islands would definitely let him join because of this friend. Zhuoan didn't expose the young man's purpose. He nodded and said, Sure, let's join the Iron Islands group. Zhuoan didn't have the map of disaster crystals on him. If he could follow the Iron Islands group into Disaster Canyon, then Zhuoan would immediately leave the group and act alone. Seeing that Zhuoan agreed, the young man beamed with joy and said, That's great. My name is Shifei. May I know brother's name? Long Wen. Zhuoan replied indifferently. Shifei didn't mind Zhuoan's cold attitude. Instead, he smiled and said, Brother Long, let's go there and report together. Zhuoan nodded, and the two of them arrived at the Iron Islands group. The two of you are joining the Iron Islands group? When Zhuoan and Shifei approached the Iron Islands group, the young island master's sister rode on a huge white wolf and walked in front of the two of them. Behind her were 2 guards in black armor. The woman was wearing a white woolen coat, and her fur fluttered in the wind. She had a unique charm. Honorable Miss Hanlan, the two of us are willing to join the Iron Islands group and follow you to explore Disaster Canyon. Shifei bowed to the woman and said with a smile. The woman in white didn't even look at Shifei. Instead, she pointed at Zhuoan and said, You are qualified to join our group. The smile on Shifei's face froze. He said anxiously, Miss Hanlan, we came together. If my friend can join your group, I should be able to too. The woman in white didn't hold back and said, You are too weak. You are not qualified to join our group. Get lost. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude. Shifei's face turned pale, especially when he saw the killing intent in the eyes of the 2 guards in black armor. He couldn't help but retreat. Zhuoan extended his right hand and stopped the guards in black armor. Brat, you dare to stop us? One of the guards in black armor looked at Zhuoan with an unfriendly gaze. He suddenly pulled out the scimitar at his waist and slashed at Zhuoan's head. Zhuoan moved his right foot slightly and dodged the scimitar. Then, he punched the guard in black armor in the chest. Bang! The guard in black armor groaned and fell to the ground. His body twitched, and he was seriously injured. How dare you? The other guard in black armor snorted. He faced Zhuoan but didn't attack. His strength was the same as the other guard in black armor. If the latter was defeated by the young man in front of him, there was no need to mention him. On the other hand, the woman riding on the white wolf's beautiful eyes flashed. She waved her hand and stopped the young man who pulled out the scimitar. Her beautiful eyes stared at Zhuoan and said indifferently, What is your name? Long Wen, Zhuoan said calmly. The woman in white was surprised by Zhuoan's calmness. She smiled and said, Do you know the price of injuring my subordinate? I don't know, Zhuoan said straightforwardly. The woman in white chuckled and glanced at Shifei who was standing behind Zhuoan. She said, Since you are a friend, you can join the team as well. Hearing this, Shifei's eyes were filled with surprise. He quickly bowed to the woman in white. Thump, thump. At this moment, the young island master also rushed over on an even bigger white wolf. He looked at the guard in black armor who was beaten to the ground by Zhuoan. He looked at the woman in white and said, Hanlan, what happened? The woman in white shook her head and said, Nothing, just now, it was just a misunderstanding. The young island master nodded. Soon after, he took another look at Zhuoan before riding the white wolf to the center of the crowd. In a deep voice, he cried out, Everyone, I have already gathered everyone. This time, the Disaster Canyon will be filled with difficulties. I hope that everyone is mentally prepared. I am the young island master of the Iron Islands, Liu Rufeng. I am here to warn everyone in advance that there is a high chance of dying in the disaster canyon. If you are afraid, you still have a chance to leave now. Otherwise, you will not have another chance." After Liu Rufeng finished speaking, he looked around and found that no one left. He smiled and said, "Okay, let's go. You two follow me. You are responsible for my safety in the disaster canyon. Do you understand?" Chapter 2254. Calamity Canyon. I've already told my brother. The two of you are my Imperial Guards. Remember to protect my life. Otherwise, you know the consequences. After entering the waning crescent, Liu Hanlan suddenly said something to Zhuowen and Shifei who were beside her. "Don't worry, Miss Hanlan. Shifei will definitely risk his life to protect you." Shifei immediately expressed his loyalty. Liu Hanlan didn't even look at Shifei. Instead, she looked at Zhuowen. Zhuowen's eyes were calm and he just nodded. Seeing Zhuowen's calm expression, Liu Hanlan's beautiful eyes flashed with anger. She asked coldly, "What about you?" Zhuowen glanced at Liu Hanlan and nodded perfunctorily. He did not say much, which made Liu Hanlan even angrier. "Let's go." In the end, Liu Hanlan did not flare up. Instead, she said in a fit of pique and rode the white wolf to catch up with the team. Zhuowen laughed in his heart. This Liu Hanlan was like a child, without any scheming. It seemed that she had been spoiled since childhood. In this starry sky, where the strong preyed on the weak, an innocent girl like Liu Hanlan was rare. Although Liu Hanlan looked petty, Zhuowen had a good impression of her. If she were to encounter any danger after entering the disaster canyon, he could lend a helping hand. Especially once, a giant star beast broke through everyone's defense and rushed directly towards Liu Hanlan. Liu Hanlan was so scared that her beautiful face turned pale. However, Zhuowen took it down in advance, allowing Liu Hanlan to escape. Because of this, Liu Hanlan's attitude towards Zhuowen became extremely friendly and even somewhat concerned. Her brother Liu Rufeng's attitude towards Zhuowen also became better than before. However, Zhuowen was somewhat helpless. Since that time, Liu Hanlan had become more talkative. She would often talk to Zhuowen and even give things to Zhuowen. From Liu Hanlan's beautiful eyes, Zhuowen knew that this little girl had fallen in love. This made Zhuowen quite speechless. Didn't he just save this little girl once? Was it necessary for this little girl to fall in love with him? What Zhuowen did not know was that Liu Hanlan was not old. Moreover, this was her first experience and had not experienced any great storms. At that time, when the giant star beast rushed in front of her, she was most helpless and scared. However, Zhuowen saved her. It was also the first time in her life that she was saved by a strange man. In addition, Zhuowen was not bad-looking and had a unique and mysterious temperament. Unconsciously, Liu Hanlan was attracted to Zhuowen. They advanced in the starry sky for another half a month. In this half a month, the number of giant star beasts encountered was much less than before. Therefore, the team did not suffer any losses. Suddenly, Liu Rufeng, who was leading the way, raised his right hand and signaled the team to stop. He stopped in front of a huge rock wall and at the same time, took out a map and frowned. Zhuowen could see clearly that this rock wall was clearly a camouflage. There was definitely another world behind the rock wall. From Liu Rufeng's reaction, this rock wall should be the entrance to the disaster canyon. However, Liu Rufeng did not see that the rock wall was hiding a camouflage. Thinking of this, Zhuowen went straight through the team and came in front of the rock wall. "Long Wen, what do you want?" Liu Rufeng looked at Zhuowen and said coldly. "This rock wall is just a camouflage. I think this is the real entrance," Zhuowen said and waved his sleeve. His right hand formed a seal and pointed out. After 3 breaths of time, the rock wall disappeared and a deep canyon entrance appeared in front of everyone. "You also know about arrays. Are you a divine array master?" Liu Rufeng saw the canyon entrance in front of him and was surprised. He immediately looked up and down at Zhuowen and asked in surprise. Zhuowen smiled and said, "I can't be called a divine array master. I only know a little about arrays." "Haha, not bad. After this trip to the disaster canyon, I will reward you handsomely. Liu Rufeng patted Zhuowen's shoulder and immediately raised his hand and led the team into the canyon. Liu Hanlan rode the white wolf to Zhuowen's side and said with a smile, "I didn't expect you to be so secretive. Miss Hanlan has never asked." "You can't say that I'm secretive." Zhuowen cupped his hands and said indifferently. Liu Hanlan didn't seem to notice Zhuowen's distant attitude at all, and said rather warmly, "Disaster Canyon should be even more dangerous. When the time comes, you must protect me well. You must not let me suffer any harm." Looking at Liu Hanlan's eager expression, Zhuowen was speechless. This girl was not afraid of death. After entering the canyon, the team from the Iron Islands became more cautious and Zhuowen followed behind silently. "Miss Hanlan, take this." Zhuowen took out a disc array and handed it to Liu Hanlan. Liu Hanlan took the disc array with a shy look on her face. She chuckled and said, "Why are you suddenly giving me something?" Zhuowen said seriously, "I'm afraid I need to leave for a while. This disc array contains a defensive array. If you encounter any danger, just activate the disc array." "What? You're leaving? Where are you going?" Liu Hanlan was stunned. As soon as she finished speaking, she realized that Zhuowen had disappeared. "Where is he?" Liu Hanlan looked around but did not find any trace of Zhuowen. Shifei, who was on the other side of Liu Hanlan, could not help but shudder. He said with a trembling voice, "Miss Hanlan, Brother Longwen just disappeared into thin air. I don't even know what happened. He just disappeared in front of me." Liu Hanlan was shocked and fell silent. She was not stupid. From the scene of Zhuowen's disappearance, she could see that Zhuowen's origin was not simple. As for why someone like Zhuowen would follow their team, it was actually very easy to explain. He probably wanted to enter the Disaster Canyon and the former did not have a map of the Disaster Canyon, so he followed their team. Gently stroking the disc array in her hand, Liu Hanlan revealed a self-deprecating smile. Zhuowen's disappearance did not attract the attention of the team. Chapter 2255. A familiar voice. After leaving the group, Zhuowen's divine sense scanned the Disaster Canyon without restraint. What surprised Zhuowen was that the Disaster Canyon was huge. His divine sense could cover a large area, but he couldn't find the end of the canyon. However, what comforted Zhuowen was that the disaster crystal or vein in the Disaster Canyon was really rich. Within the range of his divine sense, he found hundreds of ore veins, and each vein had more than 1,000,000 pieces of disaster crystal ore. It had to be said that the amount of disaster crystal ore in the Disaster Canyon was huge. Zhuowen's divine sense also detected the Iron Islands team that had just entered the Disaster Canyon. The Iron Islands team was moving forward very cautiously, so their speed was naturally very slow. Zhuowen didn't know how far behind they were. Although it was said that the Disaster Canyon was extremely dangerous, Zhuowen didn't find any danger. Whoosh whoosh. 2 sword lights were summoned by Zhuowen. They were the Thunderfire sword and the Blood Immortal sword. "Kid, why did you call us out?" Xiao Hei sat on the sword hilt and said lazily. "Help me mine," Zhuowen said with a smile. "What? Mine?" Xiao Hei and the Blood Immortal exclaimed at the same time. "Yes, it's mining." Zhuowen nodded seriously, and then told them about the Disaster Canyon. Only then did the 2 guys agree to help Zhuowen mine the disaster crystal or vein. Don't underestimate these 2 guys just because they were small in size, but they were definitely the best at mining. These 2 fellas had dug out a lot of mineral veins behind Zhuowen's back. Not to mention other things, Blackie and Blood Immortal had dug out the Heaven Devourer mineral vein hidden in the Devourer King's Bone Palace and devoured it. After instructing the 2 guys, Zhuowen's gaze fell on the end of the canyon. His eyes flickered, and he finally decided to go to the end of the canyon. Zhuowen's speed was not fast. Although his divine sense could not detect the danger in this place, his intuition told him that this was definitely not a good place. It would not be wrong to be careful. About 2 hours later, Zhuowen stopped. His gaze fell on the front as a serious expression appeared on his face. At the end of the canyon, a rolling black fog blocked their line of sight. Zhuowen also discovered that strange lightning arcs were faintly flashing within the black fog. They flickered brightly and were exceptionally conspicuous within the black fog. Moreover, when Zhuowen's spiritual consciousness wanted to probe into the black fog, he discovered that his spiritual consciousness was blocked outside, and could not enter at all. This place shouldn't be a good place, but there might be great treasures here. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. This disaster canyon was definitely not simple, especially this black mist that gave him a very dangerous feeling. He felt that if he were to enter, he would definitely die without a burial ground. However, Zhuowen still planned to go in and take a look. With Zhuowen's current strength, as long as it was not a particularly terrifying expert, it would be very difficult to kill him. Even if the great Brahma heaven personally came, Zhuowen might not necessarily die. It could be said that he was already unknowingly standing in the ranks of the great Brahma domain's top experts. There were very few who could threaten him. Even if this black fog was a dangerous place, Zhuowen believed that it should be enough to protect himself. Thinking of this, Zhuowen waved his sleeve and summoned an ink-black imperial jade seal. It was the phagocytosis. During this period of time, he had been constantly refining the phagocytosis. He had already refined more than 2,000 restrictions, and their power had increased compared to before. The phagocytosis surged with ink-black energy that surrounded Zhuowen, protecting Zhuowen's safety. Bang! As soon as Zhuowen stepped into the black fog, a series of banging sounds could be heard. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. The moment he entered the black fog, terrifying lightning arcs greeted him like raindrops, but they were all blocked by the phagocytosis. What powerful lightning arcs! These lightning arcs should be enough to kill any cultivator below the 6th level of the Void Sky Realm, right? Zhuowen looked at the densely packed lightning arcs around him in shock. He was also quite shocked. Zhuowen continued to follow the lightning arcs, and the deeper he went, the more terrifying the lightning arcs were. They were densely packed like the wrath of heaven. In the beginning, the phagocytosis could barely block the lightning arcs, but as he went deeper, the lightning arcs became too powerful. Zhuowen had no choice but to use the power of faith to increase the power of the phagocytosis. Only then did the lightning arcs not break through the phagocytosis's defense. The lightning arc area was not long, but Zhuowen felt as if he had entered a bottomless abyss. He walked in a daze for 4 hours before reaching the edge of the lightning arc area. Array! When Zhuowen walked out of the lightning arc area, his body sank and he almost knelt on the ground. There was actually a gravity array here, and it was not a normal gravity array, but rather a supergravity array. Zhuowen's main body was at the peak of the 7th level of the Void Sky Realm, but he almost knelt on the ground. It could be seen just how powerful this gravity array was. Intruder, if you don't want to die, then scram. The moment he entered the gravity array, a cold voice sounded. It was the voice of a woman. However, when Zhuowen heard this voice, his pupils couldn't help shrinking. This was because he was too familiar with this voice. It was Mu Chenshue's voice. Chen Shui, it's you. Are you here? I am Zhuowen. Zhuowen said with an excited expression. Hong Long Long. As soon as Zhuowen spoke, the lightning arc region behind him suddenly went berserk. After which, the densely packed lightning arcs fused together to form a huge lightning mouth that smashed towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He reacted quickly and immediately sent out the phagocytosis, smashing it behind him. Peng! The phagocytosis slammed into the lightning arc mouth, but it only slowed it down. Then the phagocytosis was sent flying, but the lightning arc mouth did not slow down at all. It was a good thing that Zhuowen took advantage of the gap just now to escape the lightning arc mouth's attack range, causing the lightning arc mouth to miss. Chen Shui, I am Zhuowen. Why are you attacking me? Zhuowen slightly knit his brows. Although this voice was Mu Chenshue's voice, the tone of her voice was strange and filled with disgust. This made Zhuowen very confused. Scram. If you don't scram, I'll kill you. The cold voice sounded once again, but this time it was filled with a thick killing intent. Sorry, I must see you. I won't leave. Zhuowen's eyes suddenly became incomparably sharp. Mu Chenshue's disappearance had become a mystery in his heart. This time he had finally found a clue about Mu Chenshue, so how could he give up like this? Thinking of this, Zhuowen formed a seal with both hands. The phagocytosis suddenly expanded to several hundred feet and blasted at the lightning arc mouth without any hesitation. At the same time, Zhuowen took out the everlasting ice lotus. Instantly, the surrounding temperature plummeted, as if even space was about to be frozen by this terrifying cold air. Ever since the everlasting ice lotus swallowed the ice source, its power had increased by a lot. It was even more terrifying than a normal heaven-breaking divine artifact. However, Zhuowen's current cultivation was still too low, so he could not display the full might of the everlasting ice lotus. However, Zhuowen knew that once his cultivation increased, the everlasting ice lotus would become even more terrifying. After the phagocytosis stopped the lightning arc mouth, Zhuowen silently released the everlasting ice lotus onto the lightning arc mouth. Chapter 2256. Conflict A. The cold voice exclaimed in surprise. Clearly, she was quite surprised that Zhuowen was able to break through her lightning mouth. The phagocytosis and the infinite ice lotus flew to Zhuowen's side and floated in the air, while Zhuowen stared firmly into the darkness ahead. He was sure that the owner of this voice was Mu Chunxue, but the latter couldn't recognize him. He also knew the reason. His mother had already told him the reason. Since he had found Mu Chunxue this time, Zhuowen would never give up this opportunity. He must see the Mu Chunxue with his own eyes. What happened to her back then? And was she the one who fought with Lord Brahma? If you don't want to die, it's best that you don't go forward. Otherwise, you'll regret it. The cold voice sounded again. Zhuowen shook his head and said in a deep voice, "If I don't go forward and see you, I'll really regret it." As he spoke, Zhuowen's divine sense controlled the devouring seal and the infinite ice lotus to revolve around him, while he transformed into a stream of light that shot towards the depths of the mountain at an extremely fast speed. Boom! 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 Not long after Zhuowen moved forward, a terrifying explosion sounded. Then, he discovered that at the end of the darkness, terrifying flames swept out. These flames were red in color. The flames were constantly converging and burning, forming the shadows of phoenixes. The moment he saw these flames, Zhuowen knew that the woman in the depths of the darkness must be Mu Chunxue. In today's world, besides his wife, Mu Chunxue, there was no second person who could possess phoenix flames. Zhuowen grabbed the infinite ice lotus with his right hand and suddenly threw it over. Immediately, the infinite ice lotus bloomed with beautiful petals. Ice blue cold air spread out in all directions, freezing the space. Bang! 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 When the flames landed on the everlasting ice lotus, a series of explosive sounds rang out. Zhuowen was shocked to find that the everlasting ice lotus, which had always been successful, was actually showing signs of melting under the attack of the phoenix flames. What a terrifying flame! Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He had seen Mu Chunxue's phoenix flames before, and they weren't this terrifying. Even the everlasting ice lotus was showing signs of melting. Just how high did the temperature of these flames have to be? Moreover, even though he had the protection of the infinite ice lotus, Zhuowen could still clearly feel that the terrifying temperature coming from the surroundings made him feel as if he was in a furnace. Moreover, Zhuowen was still within the range of the everlasting ice lotus. If not for the everlasting ice lotus, Zhuowen would have been burned to ashes by the phoenix flames. Zhuowen's right hand pointed at the everlasting ice lotus, releasing all of its cold energy. The everlasting ice lotus had absorbed the origin of ice. It was definitely the coldest thing in the world. Although the phoenix flames were terrifying, Zhuowen didn't believe that the phoenix flames could completely melt the everlasting ice lotus. Holding the everlasting ice lotus, Zhuowen's body was surrounded by phagocytosis. He faced the surging phoenix flames in front of him, and with a stomp of his right foot, he continued to move forward. Pater, pater. As he continued to move forward, the phoenix flames became more and more terrifying, and the temperature reached an unprecedented height. Zhuowen's whole body was soaked in sweat. His face and ears were red, and his aura was like fire. The everlasting ice lotus in his hand began to melt, and a viscous liquid appeared on the crystal-clear ice lotus petals. It was the product of the melting of the ice lotus. However, Zhuowen also discovered that as the everlasting ice lotus melted, The origin of ice contained in the everlasting ice lotus seemed to be awakening. Although the everlasting ice lotus had absorbed the origin of ice, Zhuowen's strength wasn't enough to completely refine the everlasting ice lotus, so he naturally couldn't unleash the full power of the everlasting ice lotus. But now, because of the terrifying phoenix flames, the origin of ice in the everlasting ice lotus was triggered, and the origin of ice started to resist the phoenix flames. This also created an opportunity for Zhuowen to completely refine the ice origin. Back then, when he refined the everlasting ice lotus, he was stuck at the ice origin step. He had refined a part of the everlasting ice lotus, but when he wanted to refine the energy in the core of the everlasting ice lotus, the origin of ice would backfire on him. But now, it was different. The origin of ice was trying its best to resist the phoenix flames, which gave Zhuowen a chance to take advantage of it. Although this opportunity was very risky, after all, during the refining process, if the ice source turned against Zhuowen in a life-and-death struggle, Zhuowen and the infinite ice lotus would be completely devoured by the phoenix flames and die. However, Zhuowen had his own backup plan. When the time came, he would release his clone, Devour. Since his royal bloodline had been awakened, Devour's body had become much stronger than before. Although the phoenix flames were terrifying, Devour's current body should be able to resist it. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's eyes sharpened. He controlled the phagocytosis to protect himself at all times. Then, he summoned the black-clad Zhuowen. As soon as the black-clad Zhuowen appeared, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of extreme flames. The terrifying temperature twisted the surrounding space and made it collapse. The extreme flames covered the everlasting ice lotus in an instant. The origin of ice, which was resisting the phoenix flames, sensed the threat behind it, and sent out a furious soul consciousness. Unfortunately, Zhuowen didn't care about the ice origin's emotions. Instead, he kept increasing the power of the extreme flames. As the extreme flames had opened a gap in the origin of ice, Zhuowen couldn't let the origin fill it. Shortly after, more than half of the origin of ice was refined by the extreme flames. The origin of ice transmitted a resentful soul consciousness. Then, it gave up resisting the phoenix flames and turned to deal with the extreme flames. Unfortunately, half of the origin of ice had been refined, and the remaining energy couldn't save it. It was just a matter of time before Zhuowen refined it. Swoosh! Without the obstruction of the ice origin source, the phoenix flames surged forward with a boom and enveloped Zhuowen. Zhuowen's real body waved his right hand, grabbing the everlasting ice lotus. Then, he entered Devour's body. At the same time, the black-clad Zhuowen showed his real body, which had golden scales, claws, and fangs. His golden eyes were bright and spirited. Since Devour had awakened his royal bloodline, his body wasn't as big as the entire star continent anymore. Now, he was only around 10 meters tall. Although Devour had shrunk in size, he was much stronger than before. Moreover, the scales on his body weren't black like before. Now, they were golden. The phoenix flames covered Devour in just a blink of an eye. The terrifyingly high temperature twisted Devour's scales, but it couldn't break through Devour's scales. Although the flames were unable to break through the defense of the scales, the terrifyingly high temperature made Zhuowen extremely uncomfortable. It was as if the blood in his entire body was burning. Chapter 2257. The terrifying Mu Chunshu at the end of the phoenix flames was the entrance to a deep and serene cave. The flames were gushing out from this cave. Without a doubt, the owner of the cold voice from before was also in this cave. The moment Devour stepped into the cave, a wind-breaking sound came. Zhuowen's pupils shrank, and his golden right claw slammed behind him. Puff! Zhuowen felt as if his right claw had struck an incomparably vast mountain. He spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backwards, heavily smashing into the rock wall. Fortunately, Devour's body was strong enough. Although Zhuowen looked miserable, his injuries weren't too serious. Zhuowen's eyes fell behind him, and he saw a slim and graceful figure standing at the entrance of the cave. When Zhuowen saw this beautiful figure, his heart skipped a beat. He was too familiar with this beautiful figure. She was Mu Chunshu, King Devour's bloodline. No wonder you could get through my golden phoenix flames passage and come to me. Mu Chunxue indifferently looked at Devour, who was shining with golden light, and said in surprise. Zhuowen slightly knitted his brows. Whether it was the appearance or temperament of the woman in front of him, she was Mu Chunxue. However, for some unknown reason, the Mu Chunxue in front of him gave Zhuowen a strange feeling. A black vortex appeared above Devour's head, and Zhuowen's main body walked out. Chen Shui, I'm Zhuowen. Don't you remember me? Zhuowen stared at Mu Chunxue. Mu Chunxue's beautiful eyes narrowed, and she coldly said, I don't know you. I've warned you not to come in here and disturb me. Unfortunately, you're courting death. Don't blame me. Then, Mu Chunxue raised her jade-like hand and gently slapped forward. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He didn't sense any fluctuation from Mu Chunxue's palm. The palm was clearly still 10 meters away from him, but his perception told him that the palm had already landed on his chest. Bang! Devour reacted quickly, immediately standing in front of Zhuowen. He opened his mouth and released the devouring vortex. Unfortunately, although the palm seemed weak, the moment it touched the devouring vortex, the vortex twisted and collapsed, shattering into countless pieces. The soft and powerless palm landed gently on Devour's chest. Puff! Devour spat out a mouthful of blood. His chest caved in, and the hard golden scales shattered, revealing his red flesh. Blood gushed out like a fountain. It was a ghastly sight. The power of the heavenly path. Zhuowen's main body reacted quickly. He waved his sleeve, and a powerful divine power pulled Devour back. He looked at Mu Chunxue seriously. The palm Mu Chunxue had just used wasn't simple. It wasn't the power of the starry sky. The power of the starry sky was nothing to Zhuowen. Only the power of the heavenly path, which was above the power of the starry sky, could produce such an elusive palm. However, the power of the heavenly path that Mu Chunxue had displayed wasn't strong. It was even weaker than the heavenly path blood in Zhuowen's body. However, Mu Chunxue's use of the heavenly path had reached the acme of perfection. Although the power of the heavenly path blood she had mastered was very subtle, it could be more powerful if she used it well. Worthy of being Devour King's bloodline. Your body is so tough. Anyway, I wonder if you can take my next palm? Mu Chunxue's beautiful eyes flashed with a cold gleam. Her jade-like palm struck again, using the power of the heavenly path. Although the palm looked ordinary, it was elusive and elusive. Zhuowen's face changed slightly. He immediately summoned the phagocytosis. At the same time, he poured all the faith energy in the small temple into the phagocytosis. The power of the phagocytosis reached an unprecedented level. Boom! The phagocytosis and Mu Chunxue's jade-like palm collided. The power of the heavenly path blood exploded, turning the surrounding starry sky into a barren void. The space collapsed and ceased to exist. The phagocytosis was blown away. Zhuowen vomited a mouthful of blood. He was severely injured. However, he immediately took out a drop of the heavenly domain starry essence and adjusted his body to its peak state. Holding the phagocytosis in his hand, he looked at Mu Chunxue in front of him with a solemn expression. Mu Chunxue took a few steps back. A drop of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. Her face was as pale as snow. You're injured. Zhuowen looked at Mu Chunxue in surprise. He knew very well that with his strength, it was impossible for him to injure Mu Chunxue, who had grasped a trace of the heavenly path blood. It should be known that the woman in front of him was most likely a Void Heaven 9th Step expert. Even if Zhuowen's Devour clone had awakened the royal bloodline and had many trump cards, it was already amazing that he could survive against a Void Heaven 9th Step expert, let alone injure one. The coldness in Mu Chunxue's beautiful eyes deepened. With a cold snort, she waved her jade-like hand. Suddenly, the surrounding laws became chaotic. Zhuowen even felt a sense of suffocation and powerlessness. This feeling was similar to drowning, helpless and lonely. Zhuowen knew that Mu Chunxue was using the heavenly path blood to control the surrounding laws of the starry sky to attack him. In front of this kind of power, as long as Zhuowen didn't have the strength comparable to the heavenly path blood, it would be difficult for him to break free and resist. So what if I'm injured? You, who can't grasp the heavenly path blood, are like an ant in front of me. Mu Chunxue slowly walked over. Her beautiful eyes were filled with indifference and killing intent. Zhuowen turned his head with difficulty. Looking at Mu Chunxue, who was getting closer and closer, he was finally shocked. He had always thought that Devour, who had awakened the royal bloodline, could escape from a Void Heaven Ninth Step expert, even if he wasn't as strong as a Void Heaven Ninth Step expert. But now, he realized that he was gravely mistaken. The Heavenly Path blood was above the Starry Sky blood, and a Void Heaven Ninth Step expert who had grasped a trace of the Heavenly Path blood had absolute control over the Starry Sky blood. In other words, even a peak Void Heaven 8th Step expert was no different from an ant in front of a Void Heaven 9th Step expert. For a Void Heaven 9th Step expert, killing an Void Heaven 8th Step expert was easier than killing an ant. Ow! Devour roared. The blood in his body boiled, and a gold mist gushed out. Devour, who was suppressed to the point that he couldn't move, suddenly leaped up, grabbed Zhuowen, and fled to the side. Boom! The moment Devour left, Mu Chunxue's attack came, smashing the rock wall into smithereens. As expected of King Devour. Using a secret technique, you can actually break free from the Starry Sky blood. But you can't run far. The corners of Mu Chunxue's mouth curled into a cold smile. Her jade-like foot kicked the ground as she chased after Devour. With the power of the Heavenly Path blood, Mu Chunxue's speed was absolutely terrifying. Coupled with the fact that Devour had used a secret technique, he was extremely weak. It didn't take long for Mu Chunxue to catch up to him. Boom! Mu Chunxue lightly punched out with her right palm. The surrounding Starry Sky blood obeyed her command, forming a terrifying pressure. Devour's speed immediately slowed down. At the same time, Mu Chunxue's right palm landed heavily on Devour's body. Chapter 2258. Using the Great Path. This was definitely the most serious injury Devour had ever received, especially after he had awakened his royal bloodline. It should be noted that Devour, who had awakened his royal bloodline, was very intimidating. Zhuowen had experienced it when he was on the uninhabited planet. At that time, Yang Zhonghui had used a secret technique to escape. Devour had only needed to condense a golden claw to smash her into powder. But now, in front of Mu Chunxue, Devour was simply an ant. He was defeated with a flip of her hand, cutting an extremely sorry figure. Who are you after all? Zhuowen's real body struggled to get up from Devour's side, glaring at the beautiful woman in front of him. He knew that the woman in front of him was wearing Mu Chunxue's disguise, but she was someone else on the inside. It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that you have to die. Mu Chunxue sauntered over, reaching out her slender hand. A wisp of the Great Path's principle jumped out from Mu Chunxue's fingertip like a lively little elf. At the same time, the moment the power of the heavenly Tao became active, the surrounding Starry Sky laws seemed to come alive. They suddenly exploded, and like a sturdy rope, they bound Zhuowen with 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. Devour's injury was too severe. Moreover, Zhuowen's real body was bound by the principles of the Starry Sky. Thus, Zhuowen didn't have time to take out the heavenly star essence from his ring to help Devour recover. Mu Chunxue apparently knew that Zhuowen had the heavenly star essence. Thus, she had bound Zhuowen's real body immediately. Originally, if you didn't come after me, I would have given her face and not killed you. However, you don't know what's good for you and actually came to me. That's fine. I warned you to leave, but you still didn't listen. If you want to die, I won't care about her face anymore. After I kill you, she won't have a chance to turn the tables. At that time, I'll be me, and she won't have a chance to wake up. Mu Chunxue approached him step by step. She wasn't in a hurry to kill Zhuowen. Instead, she mumbled something inexplicable. Zhuowen immediately realized that Mu Chunxue might be the real Mu Chunxue, and the woman in front of him wasn't his wife, Mu Chunxue. Of course, Zhuowen still had no idea what had happened to Mu Chunxue. The only thing he was certain of was that Mu Chunxue, who had appeared before him, wanted to kill him. Mu Chunxue stopped in front of Zhuowen and silently looked down at him. Her jade-like hand reached out and slowly approached him. Mu Chunshua's movements were gentle, as if she wanted to caress Zhuowen's forehead. However, Zhuowen's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He could clearly sense the killing intent in Mu Chunshua's eyes, as well as the terrifying heavenly Tao law energy in the jade hand that was about to reach his forehead. He knew very well that this seemingly soft and powerless hand actually contained a terrifying strength. So long as this hand came close to his forehead, then he, Zhuowen, would definitely die. Under the threat of life and death, Zhuowen became even calmer. He lifted his head and gazed at the hand. More precisely, he wasn't looking at the hand, but at the heavenly Tao principle energy condensed in it. It wasn't the first time that Zhuowen came in contact with the heavenly Tao principle. He had obtained the heavenly Tao blood in the Luo God Palace ruins. Later on, when Devour was crossing the 20th fire, a wisp of the heavenly Tao principle descended. Moreover, because he had the heavenly Tao blood, he would often take it out to comprehend. However, his realm wasn't high enough, so he hadn't been able to comprehend the heavenly Tao principle in the heavenly Tao blood. After all, Zhuowen's original body hadn't even reached the 8 steps void sky. He hadn't comprehended the entire starry skies principle. The heavenly Tao principle was too far away for him. But today, Mu Chunshua had used the heavenly Tao principle energy again and again. Zhuowen had also witnessed the former using the heavenly Tao principle energy with his own eyes. Originally, he didn't understand the heavenly Tao principle, but at this moment, he seemed to understand and comprehend it. He indeed couldn't comprehend the heavenly Tao principle, but he had the heavenly Tao blood. If he grasped the method to use the heavenly Tao principle energy, he might be able to use the power of the heavenly Tao blood. Back then, he was a blind man groping for an elephant, so the heavenly Tao blood was of little value to him. But now, someone was using the heavenly Tao principle energy in front of him. It was like a peerless swordsman dancing with a sword in front of you. Although you didn't understand the sword art and didn't know the name of the sword art the swordsman was dancing with, you could imitate it and dance with the sword in your hand. Of course, the premise was that you had a sword in your hand. The heavenly Tao blood was the sword in Zhuowen's hand. At this moment, Mu Chunshua, who was using the heavenly Tao principle energy in front of Zhuowen, was that peerless swordsman. Although Zhuowen didn't know anything about the heavenly Tao principle energy, he could imitate it because he had the heavenly Tao blood. "Move for me." Zhuowen let out a low roar, and a thin needle of death energy hidden in his spiritual space shot out. At the same time, more than 6,000 divine soul galaxies in his spiritual space exploded and shattered. An unprecedentedly terrifying power, like a ripple, suddenly burst out from Zhuowen's body and blasted away the heavenly Tao principle energy around him. The thin needle of death chi silently shot towards Mu Chunshua. Although the thin needle of death chi was powerful, Zhuowen knew that it was useless against an expert like Mu Chunshua. However, it could delay her for a while. Sure enough, Mu Chunshua frowned slightly. Her jade-like palm changed. She pinched her fingers together and gently flicked them. The thin needle of death chi was blocked by an invisible force. However, the thin needle of death chi was not simple. Its powerful death chi had a terrifying withering property. The invisible force had only touched the thin needle for a short while before it was contaminated by the death chi and collapsed. The moment Mu Chunshua dealt with the thin needle of death chi, Zhuowen immediately took out the heavenly domain starry sky essence from his spirit ring and took a drop to restore his shattered divine soul. After his divine soul was restored, Zhuowen took out the heavenly Tao blood from his spirit ring and recalled the method Mu Chunshua used to control the heavenly Tao principle. He took out a drop of the heavenly Tao blood and began to drive it according to the method. It had to be said that the power of the heavenly Tao blood was terrifying. The moment Zhuowen took out the heavenly Tao blood, his right hand was almost distorted as if it would be annihilated into nothingness by the terrifying power of the heavenly Tao blood at any time. However, as Zhuowen continued to form seals according to Mu Chunshua's method, the destructive power became much more docile, and his distorted hand gradually recovered. Zhuowen's eyes lit up. He did not expect that he could drive the power of the heavenly Tao blood according to Mu Chunshua's method. At this moment, Mu Chunshua had destroyed the thin needle of death chi, and she also noticed the movement on Zhuowen's side. Chapter 2259. Escape. You actually have the heavenly blood. No, this aura is so familiar. It belongs to me, you thief. Mu Chunshue's beautiful eyes were gloomy. She no longer had her previous calmness. With a shout, her jade-like palm blasted towards Zhuowen like a gust of wind. Zhuowen's gaze was solemn as he suddenly activated the drop of heavenly law blood. The heavenly law energy within the drop of heavenly law blood was like a spiderweb as it densely spread out in all directions. Boom! Mu Chunshue's jade-like palm blasted the drop of heavenly blood. Instantly, the insignificant drop of heavenly blood exploded into countless small drops of blood, spreading out in all directions. The heavenly Tao's power condensed in the heavenly blood exploded like a bomb, constantly expanding, and finally erupting with a shocking power. Mu Chunshue let out a muffled groan and couldn't help but retreat dozens of steps. She was already injured, and this time, when she collided with the heavenly blood's power, her injuries naturally worsened. Zhuowen was even more unbearable. Blood mist burst out from his body as he was sent flying. However, the moment he was sent flying, he waved his sleeve and immediately put Devour into his spirit ring. He then quickly swallowed a drop of heavenly domain star essence, unfolded his torch dragon wings, and immediately left this place. Now, Zhuowen knew that with his current strength, it was impossible for him to be Mu Chunshue's opponent. If he continued to stay here, he would only be killed. Although he wanted to personally take Mu Chunshue away, he knew that he didn't have the ability to do so. Although he was unwilling, he had to make this decision. Only when his strength was comparable to Shu Tianjioding's, he would come here again to take Mu Chunshue away and ask her what had happened. Mu Chunshue didn't continue to chase after him. Instead, she stopped in place, her beautiful eyes looking at the departing figure with a complicated expression. You really don't have to worry about letting me control the body. You know my character. If this guy didn't use the power of the heavenly blood, I would definitely kill him. A voice filled with vicissitudes of life came from Mu Chunshue's body. It was also a woman's voice, but it was low and hoarse. Mu Chunshue's beautiful eyes were calm as she said, "If you dare to make a move, I guarantee that you will never be able to take revenge. At that time, your strength will also be greatly weakened." The voice fell silent and said with a complicated tone, "Then why did you ask me to do that? Don't you love your husband very much? Don't you want to stay by his side?" Mu Chunshue laughed self-deprecatingly, "I don't trust you. I can't stay awake at all times, and you're too strong. If I'm by my husband's side, and I can't control you, then my husband and the entire Rika would be finished. Also, don't forget your promise." The voice fell silent once more, and then it smiled and said, "What a cautious little girl. Don't worry, so long as you don't disturb me when I'm taking revenge. Alright, we've pretty much finished collecting all the Heaven Dao energy hidden in Calamity Gorge. Let's go." After she finished speaking, Mu Chen Shui stomped her foot. Dense ripples appeared under her feet, and she disappeared from the spot. In the black fog of Disaster Canyon, a sorry figure suddenly appeared. Zhuowen turned around to look at the black fog and found that Mu Chunshue did not chase after them. He slightly knit his brows and secretly sighed in his heart. What happened to Chen Shue's body? Why did she become like this, and why did her strength become so terrifying? Zhuowen bitterly said to himself, "I have to become stronger. Perhaps Lord Brahma knows something about this." Zhuowen's eyes became firm again. He was certain that the mysterious girl who fought with Lord Brahma was no one else but Mu Chunshue. He knew that Mu Chunshue did not chase after them and would definitely leave. At that time, he would lose contact with Mu Chunshue again. But this was a helpless move. Not to mention that he was not Mu Chunshue's match. Even if he was, he would not be able to keep Mu Chunshue here. With Mu Chunshue's current terrifying strength, unless he was stronger than Lord Brahma, it would be a fool's dream to keep Mu Chunshue here. After all, Lord Brahma had fought with Mu Chunshue, but in the end, Lord Brahma went into closed-door cultivation and Mu Chunshue did not die. The difference in strength between the two was not that big. Of course, Zhuowen knew that the current Mu Chunshue was not his wife, but someone else who was controlling his wife's body. No matter which possibility it was, Zhuowen was still not strong enough. He could not keep Mu Chunshue, which meant that the clues about Mu Chunshue were cut off again. And the only clue at present was probably Lord Brahma. It was just that he was still too weak and was not on the same level as Lord Brahma. If he went to Lord Brahma Palace now, it would be impossible for Lord Brahma to treat him as an equal, let alone get Lord Brahma to tell him about the mysterious girl. I have to become stronger, I'm still not strong enough. Zhuoan sighed softly and left this place. In the middle half of Disaster Canyon, an earth-shattering roar came from it. In front of the canyon, everyone on the Iron Archipelago stopped in their tracks and looked at the two sides of the canyon in horror. In front of them, disaster crystal veins were dug out, like long black dragon skeletons. Every vein was a supreme-grade vein, and the reserves of disaster crystal veins were extremely rich. The ones who dug out so many disaster crystal veins were not the people on the Iron Archipelago, but two very inconspicuous divine swords. Hey, all of you, get out of here. If you dare to touch these veins, I'll cut you down immediately. The blood celestial sword floated above the people on the Iron Archipelago and said arrogantly. Everyone lowered their heads submissively and naturally didn't dare to say a word. As long as they were not fools, they could see that the two divine swords were much more powerful than them. To put it bluntly, any one of the two divine swords could easily slaughter their entire team. Brother, what should we do? Most of the veins in Disaster Canyon have been dug out by these two divine swords. Liu Hanlan came to Liu Rufeng's side and said timidly. Liu Rufeng sighed softly and said, we can't do anything. These two divine swords are too powerful. The owner of such powerful divine swords must be an almighty figure. We'd better know our place. Otherwise, I'm afraid we'll be killed. Liu Hanlan nodded and looked a little depressed. Liu Rufeng saw Liu Hanlan's depression and said with a frown, are you thinking about Long Wen? Don't think about him. Since he's not in the team, I'm afraid he died somewhere. This Disaster Canyon is not a good place. Liu Hanlan did not speak. She saw Long Wen disappear in front of her with her own eyes and gave her a formation plate, saying that it could protect her. She told Liu Rufeng about this, but Liu Rufeng did not believe her at all. He concluded that Long Wen died on the way. I know about this. Brother, why don't we retreat? These two divine swords are not to be trifled with. Liu Hanlan said with some worry. Liu Rufeng looked ahead with some reluctance. He had only dug out one disaster crystal vein after entering this place, and it was of relatively poor quality. The rest were basically taken by the two divine swords. However, Liu Rufeng also knew that he could not compete with the two divine swords. He sighed and said, let's go. Chapter 2260. Surprise attack. Brother. Liu Rufeng fell to the ground from the white wolf. Liu Hanlan screamed and immediately got down from her horse to check on Liu Rufeng's injuries. The surrounding cultivators of the Iron Islands were also shocked. A few of Liu Rufeng's bodyguards got down from their horses and rushed to Liu Rufeng's side. One of them pulled out an arrow that was nailed to the ground and said, Iron Hook arrow. It's the work of those bastards from the Iron Hook Island. Cough. Liu Rufeng spat out a mouthful of black blood. His face was covered in black gas, which made him look ferocious and terrifying. It's poisonous. What should we do? Liu Hanlan's pretty face changed. Liu Rufeng was a true God 3 disasters expert, but he couldn't withstand the poison. It showed how terrifying the poison was. Just as the Iron Islands were in a daze, the sound of arrows whizzing through the air could be heard. They were densely packed and swept toward the Iron Islands team in an instant. Wretched cries rang out from the group. The arrows were too concentrated. Add to that the fact that the Iron Archipelago's cultivators were in a daze, more than half of the cultivators were hit. Moreover, the arrows contained terrifying poison. Even Liu Rufeng, a true God 3 disasters, couldn't withstand the poison, let alone the other cultivators of the Iron Islands team. Liu Hanlan was lucky. More than 10 loyal cultivators of the Iron Islands were protecting Liu Hanlan and Liu Rufeng, so Liu Hanlan was unharmed. However, only 2 or 3 of the loyal cultivators were left after the rain of arrows. It was impossible for them to protect Liu Hanlan and Liu Rufeng from the next wave of arrows. At this moment, The Iron Islands team was utterly defeated. Only about 30% of them were left. The rest were either shot in the heart by the rain of arrows or killed by the poison. The remaining cultivators of the Iron Islands were in despair. They knew that they couldn't withstand the next wave of arrows. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. A team appeared at the entrance of the Disaster Canyon. At the front of this group, a young man dressed in a dark green robe was riding a large white horse, slowly approaching. Behind the young man were soldiers with bows and crossbows aimed at them. If the Iron Archipelago made any strange movements, these archers would not hesitate to fire their arrows. The young master of Iron Hook Island, Jiang Jie. Liu Hanlan stared at the young man riding on the white horse, her beautiful eyes spitting fire. The young man named Jiang Jie looked at Liu Hanlan and said with a smile, "So it's the little princess of the Iron Islands. Aya, I'm really sorry. I thought that the Disaster Canyon was full of danger, so I fired an arrow just in case. I didn't expect to hurt your team. I'm really sorry." Liu Hanlan was so angry that her whole body was trembling. Jiang Jie's words were definitely meant to provoke her, but Liu Hanlan did not dare to flare up. She was very clear that the situation was pressing and she had to remain calm. "Jiang Jie, since it was an unintentional mistake on your part, we won't pursue it any further. Now, we plan to leave the Disaster Canyon. Please make way for your team," Liu Hanlan said calmly. But Jiang Jie did not seem to have heard it. The corners of his mouth revealed a mocking smile as he said, "Miss Hanlan, what's the hurry for? I've heard of Miss Hanlan's beautiful name. Why don't you come with me to Iron Hook Island?" Liu Hanlan's beautiful face changed greatly. This Jiang Jie was too shameless. He was trying to take her, Liu Hanlan, hostage. "In your dreams," Liu Hanlan said coldly. Jiang Jie's face gradually darkened. He grinned and said, "Since Miss Hanlan doesn't know how to appreciate kindness, then don't blame me for killing them all." With that, Jiang Jie waved his right hand. The archers behind him immediately drew their bows and arrows. The cold light reflected from the tip of the arrows was particularly frightening. "Miss Hanlan, quickly surrender and do as Jiang Jie said. Otherwise, we'll all die." Suddenly, the remaining 30% of the Iron Islands cultivators, under the threat of death, turned their heads and glared at Liu Hanlan. Liu Hanlan's beautiful face turned pale. She could not help but kneel on the ground and look at her team members in disbelief. Jiang Jie, who had planned to kill the Iron Islands cultivators, saw this scene. He raised his hand slightly and motioned for the archers behind him to stop shooting. Then, he looked at the Iron Islands in front of him with a mocking gaze. "Interesting. If any of you can capture your beloved Miss Hanlan, then I'll spare his life." Jiang Jie joked. As soon as these words came out, all the cultivators of the Iron Islands cultivators focused their eyes on Liu Hanlan. Feeling the burning and murderous gazes, Liu Hanlan's face turned pale. She shouted, "Don't forget that you're from the Iron Islands. Miss Hanlan, are you joking? We can't even keep our lives. What's the point of talking about the Iron Islands?" One of the cultivators in the team sneered. Liu Hanlan looked and found that the person who spoke was Shifei. "Go." Shifei looked at Liu Hanlan's eyes without any guilt. He kicked his right foot and rushed toward Liu Hanlan. The rest of the cultivators also rushed forward. There were only 2 or 3 of them who were loyal to the Iron Islands. Moreover, they were seriously injured in the wave of arrow rain just now. Therefore, they did not last long before they were killed by the crowd. Liu Hanlan looked at the ferocious faces rushing toward her. She could not help but think of Long Wen's face. She took out the last formation plate that the man left for her and murmured softly, "I believe that you're a good person." After saying that, he threw the formation plate out. The formation plate's surface burst with a blazing light. Then, waves of strong ripples swept out from the formation plate. Boom, boom, boom. The cultivators who rushed over were caught off guard and all of them crashed into the ripples. There was a dull and ear-piercing sound. Then, the cultivators who crashed into the ripples all exploded into a cloud of blood mist. They could not be more dead. Seeing that the cultivators in front of them had died, many of the cultivators at the back made a prompt decision and stopped. Unfortunately, the ripples were not static. They were like rings of light that suddenly spread out. The cultivators at the back who wanted to retreat did not last long under the spreading ripples and exploded into a cloud of blood mist. In just 3 breaths, the cultivators from the Iron Islands who wanted to capture Liu Hanlan were all wiped out. Naturally, Shifei was among them. Liu Hanlan looked at the scene in a daze. She did not expect that the formation plate that Zhuoan left for her would contain such terrifying power. None of the cultivators on the Iron Islands could resist the ripples released by the formation plate. Jiang Jie was dumbstruck. He could not help but take a few steps back in fear. Chapter 2261. The unlucky Jiang Jie. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. As soon as she finished speaking, arrows pierced through the air like fuses, forming a dense rain of arrows that shot towards Liu Hanlan. However, when the rain of arrows came into contact with Liu Hanlan, they were affected by the terrifying ripple and exploded into countless pieces. Moreover, due to the stimulation of the rain of arrows, the ripple suddenly became violent and rushed towards Jiang Jie's group like a flood. Jiang Jie naturally saw this scene and immediately turned his horse around and fled at full speed. The ripple gave him the aura of death. He knew that if he did not escape, his fate would be the same as the cultivators of the Iron Islands, exploding into a cloud of blood mist. As soon as Jiang Jie left, his group immediately fell into chaos. Moreover, the speed of the cultivators in the group was naturally not as fast as Jiang Jie, so the ripple quickly caught up to them. A cloud of blood mist exploded, and the smell of blood immediately spread throughout the canyon. In an instant, the group that Jiang Jie brought along was completely annihilated. As the leader of the group, Jiang Jie was currently fleeing in panic. Unfortunately, although the speed of the white horse he was riding was fast enough, it was still not as fast as the ripple that spread out from the array disc. The moment Jiang Jie was about to rush out of the Disaster Canyon's entrance, the ripple floated past his body. Immediately, Jiang Jie and the white horse he was riding exploded into a cloud of blood mist. They were dead. Liu Hanlan looked at the scene in shock. That moment just now had given her too much of a shock. The array disc had only been activated, but the power that erupted from it had completely annihilated the troops of the Iron Islands and Iron Hook Island. This was too unbelievable. The array disc returned to Liu Hanlan's hand, but the latter's beautiful eyes were filled with a complicated look. She muttered in a low voice, "Who is Long Wen?" Liu Hanlan knew that someone who could casually send out such a powerful array disc was definitely not an ordinary person. Even her father, the island master of the Iron Islands, did not have such a powerful array disc. "This is an antidote pill. Give it to your brother and he will recover soon." Suddenly, an indifferent voice came from behind her. Liu Hanlan quickly turned around and saw a white-robed young man floating in the air behind her. Beside the white-robed young man were 2 divine swords. Liu Hanlan was no stranger to these 2 divine swords. They were the divine swords that had previously excavated the disaster crystal vein in front of their group. Liu Hanlan had personally experienced the power of the 2 divine swords. In her opinion, any one of the divine swords was probably more powerful than her father, the island master of the Iron Islands. Previously, she was still guessing what kind of almighty being the owner of these 2 divine swords was, but she didn't expect it to be Long Wen, who had joined their team at the beginning. Liu Hanlan silently accepted the detoxification pill that Shuo Wen tossed to her. She thanked him softly and fed the detoxification pill to Liu Rufeng. Not long after, Liu Rufeng, who was already deeply poisoned and unconscious, suddenly opened his eyes. The black gas on his face also faded away. "Brother, you're finally awake." Liu Hanlan hugged Liu Rufeng excitedly. "What's going on here?" Liu Hanlan helped Liu Rufeng up and briefly told him what had happened here. Liu Rufeng also knew that the young man in white floating in the air was his savior. "Senior, this junior has eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Please forgive me, senior, and thank you for saving my life." Liu Rufeng cupped his hands respectfully, but he was extremely surprised. He did not expect that the ordinary Long Wen, who had joined their team before, was actually such a powerful expert. Liu Rufeng was not a fool. He knew that an expert like Long Wen had joined his group for the purpose of entering the Disaster Canyon. Zhuowen nodded and did not pay much attention to the siblings. To put it bluntly, Zhuowen was no longer someone from the same world as the two of them. His cultivation was far greater than theirs. He had only followed the group from the Iron Islands because he wanted to use the Iron Islands to enter the Canyon of Disaster. Now that he had returned the favor for leading him into the Disaster Canyon, he did not want to be too involved with the two of them. Xiaohei, have you dug out all the mineral veins in the Disaster Canyon? Zhuowen asked. Blackie sat on the hilt of his sword and said in an old-fashioned manner, "That's not the case. There are too many mineral veins in this Disaster Canyon. Naturally, the quality of the mineral veins is uneven. This time, the little blood disciple and I have specially selected high-quality mineral veins to dig. As for the inferior ones, we are too lazy to dig." Zhuowen nodded. Just now, he had scanned the area with his soul consciousness and found that the quality of the mineral veins that Xiaohei and Blood Immortal had dug out were very high. The purity was even higher than the disaster crystal he had obtained in the trial ground. Moreover, the quantity of mineral veins that they had dug out this time was not small. It was much more than the disaster crystal he had obtained in the trial ground. Although Devour was approaching the Three Disasters realm, his need for disaster crystal would be much higher than before. However, Zhuowen did not want to dig out all the mineral veins in the Disaster Canyon. After all, if he dug them all out, it would cause a big commotion. Moreover, he did not know if the mysterious woman was still there. He did not want to alert the enemy. In the future, if he lacked disaster crystal, he could come to the Disaster Canyon again. After all, he had marked this canyon. It would be much more convenient for him to come here next time. After Zhuowen collected the disaster crystal veins into Devour's internal world, he glanced at Liu Hanlan and Liu Rufeng. Then, he took the Blood Immortal sword and the Thunder Fire sword and dashed toward the entrance of the Disaster Canyon. "Senior, what's your name after all?" Just as Zhuowen was about to leave the Disaster Canyon, Liu Hanlan clenched her teeth and suddenly shouted. Liu Rufeng was so scared that he hurriedly covered her mouth. Zhuowen did not stop because of Liu Hanlan's voice. He just replied indifferently, "Zhuowen." Looking at the disappearing figure, Liu Hanlan was disappointed and disappointed. She sighed and said, "His name is Zhuowen." "Zhuowen? I seem to have heard this name before." Liu Rufeng frowned and said, "Brother, let's go. There are so many people with the same name in this world. Maybe you remembered wrongly." Liu Hanlan shook her head and said helplessly. Liu Rufeng nodded and the two of them left the Disaster Canyon. This time, their losses in the Disaster Canyon were not small. Moreover, they were attacked by the Iron Hook Island. This time, when they returned, they would definitely report to their father. At that time, they would flatten the Iron Hook Island. Right, I remember now. I've heard of Zhuowen's name before. Moreover, it's like thunder in my ears. I remember there was a rumor in the Starfield that a young cultivator named Zhuowen had single-handedly destroyed 5 of the top 10 sects in the Starfield. His name was illustrious in the Starfield, and it shook the ancients and dazzled the contemporaries. When leaving the Disaster Canyon, Liu Rufeng suddenly remembered something and quickly said to Liu Hanlan. Liu Hanlan was startled and immediately opened her mouth wide. She could not hide the shock in her eyes. She had also heard of Zhuowen's deeds. At first, she did not react. Now that Liu Rufeng said it, the young man who called himself Zhuowen was most likely the Zhuowen in the Starfield. Both of them were equally mysterious and powerful. It seems that we missed out on something. If we could get closer to that person, it would be a lot of benefits for our Iron Island. Liu Rufeng said with some annoyance. Liu Hanlan said calmly, "Brother, we are not on the same level as him. We are lucky that he helped us." Chapter 2262. Meet Ma Yujie again. After leaving Disaster Canyon, Zhuo Wenwen was about to leave waning, but an untimely voice appeared behind him. "Aya. So it was Brother Zhuo. What a coincidence. I didn't expect to meet Brother Zhuo here." As soon as the voice came out, Zhuowen's pupils suddenly shrank. He turned around and stared at the owner of the voice. This was a fatty. He was round and his face was rosy. He looked rather comical and laughable. However, the moment Zhuowen saw the fatty, a cold light filled his eyes. With a wave of his sleeve, mighty godforce surged out, forming a giant hand that slammed towards the fatty. Bang! The fat man smiled. He stretched out his fat hand and clenched his fist. Instantly, the giant hand made of divine power was smashed into pieces by the fat man's hand. Zhuowen could not help but take a few steps back. He looked at the fatty in front of him cautiously. He was quite shocked in his heart. The fat man who suddenly appeared in front of him was none other than Ma Yujie, who had swindled the white spacetime key from the small world. Back then, Zhuowen only thought that Ma Yujie's array Dao level was terrifyingly strong. Now that they had a rematch, Ma Yujie's strength was actually this strong. Moreover, Zhuowen still couldn't see through this fatty's true strength. It could be seen that this fatty's concealment technique was extremely brilliant. In addition, Zhuowen knew nothing about the fatty's background, so Zhuowen was still extremely wary of the fatty. Aya, brother Zhuo, what's the meaning of this? When old friends meet, why are you fighting and killing? Ma Yujie patted his stomach and shook his head as he spoke. But Zhuowen snorted coldly and said, Brother Ma, you can't have forgotten what you've done, right? Is the white spacetime key with you? Ma Yujie rolled his eyes and hurriedly denied, how is that possible? How could the spacetime key be with me? Don't accuse me wrongly. Zhuowen sighed in his heart. He knew that the fatty was not a simple person. It would be harder to get the fatty to admit that he had the white spacetime divine key. Brother Zhuo, I don't know what happened to you. But at that time, this Ma really did hand the key to your hand. Don't deny it. Ma Yujie hurriedly said. Zhuowen was too lazy to talk nonsense with this damn fatty. He knew that this damn fatty would never admit it. Instead, he said coldly, what do you want from me? Also, aren't you a Northern Universe cultivator? Why did you come to the far west? Ma Yujie chuckled. This fat lord calls the world my home and has no fixed abode. I'm not a cultivator from Northern U, you might have misunderstood. Zhuowen did not answer. This damn fatty's origin was mysterious. He definitely would not tell the truth, so he simply remained silent. Ma Yujie saw that Zhuowen was silent and did not beat around the bush. Instead, he took out a spirit fox from his bosom. This spirit fox was only the size of a palm. It had light purple fur and purple eyes. It looked small and cute. Hidden spirit fox. Zhuowen looked at the purple spirit fox in Ma Yujie's hand in surprise. He naturally knew about the hidden spirit fox. It was also a kind of giant star beast. Although the hidden spirit fox looked small and cute in Ma Yujie's hand, if this hidden spirit fox really fought, it would become a giant beast thousands of feet long. The ranks of the hidden spirit fox were easy to identify. They were divided into 1 to 9 tails, with 1 tail being the lowest and 9 tails being the highest. The hidden spirit fox in Ma Yujie's hand actually had 7 tails. It was an extremely rare little guy in the 8 heavens. Of course, the hidden spirit fox was a kind of giant star beast. Although its combat strength was powerful, it also had a special ability. That was, it was extremely sensitive to natural treasures. It could be said that the hidden spirit fox would not go to a place without treasures. Once there was a hidden spirit fox in a certain place, there would definitely be a great treasure hidden inside. Haha. Yes, this little guy is my pet. It's very cute, right? The reason I came to this far west land from Northern Universe is mainly because of this little guy. The fatty chuckled. There are originally many natural treasures inside the yin-yang waxing queue. This little guy is naturally agitated. This is very normal, Zhuowen said calmly. But Ma Yujie shook his head and said, Brother Zhuo, I'm not an ignorant person. The hidden spirit fox's range of sensing natural treasures is limited. Moreover, how far Northern Universe is from this yin-yang waxing queue? I think you know better than me, right? Back then, when I just left that small world, this little guy became agitated. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He understood what Ma Yujie meant. The fluctuations of natural treasures were definitely limited by distance. It was already not bad that the hidden spirit fox could sense the fluctuations of natural treasures from tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. However, the yin-yang waxing Q was at least 1 trillion kilometers away from northern universe. This was a very terrifying distance. If the hidden spirit fox could sense the fluctuations of natural treasures from so far away, it was either the hidden spirit fox in Ma Yujie's possession was not simple, or the treasure was so powerful that the hidden spirit fox could sense it from so far away. From Ma Yujie's expression, Zhuowen could see that his hidden spirit fox did not have such a powerful perception. Then, could it be that there was an earth-shattering treasure inside the yin-yang waxing Q? Brother Zhuo, I see that you are a smart person. There should be an amazing treasure hidden in this yin-yang waxing Q, otherwise, my pet would not be so agitated. Why don't we go search for the treasure together? Ma Yujie asked tentatively. Zhuowen sneered in his heart. How could this damned fatty be so kind as to share such a treasure with him? Zhuowen guessed that this damned fatty must have already entered the yin-yang waxing Q before. However, he encountered some difficulties inside, so he left the treasure trove and planned to find someone to help him. Coincidentally, he met Zhuowen here. Zhuowen's heart was as clear as a mirror. Although he knew that this damned fatty might be dragging him down with him, Zhuowen did not intend to refuse. He also wanted to see what kind of treasure could cause the hidden spirit fox to become agitated from tens of millions of kilometers away. Although this damned fatty's strength was not bad, coupled with his powerful level 9 array Dao, Zhuowen might have been afraid in the past. However, Zhuowen was not afraid in the slightest now. Ever since he had learned the technique of using the heavenly Dao from Mu Chunxue, coupled with the heavenly Dao blood in his body, the power he could unleash was absolutely earth-shattering. The heavenly Dao blood was his final trump card. If they really went all out, this damned fatty might not be Zhuowen's match. Zhuowen had just suffered a loss at the hands of this damned fatty. This time, Zhuowen planned to repay this loss. Chapter 2263. Spirit Fox. Ma Yujie hadn't expected Zhuowen to agree so readily, and he was slightly stunned for a moment. But he quickly recovered from his shock and said, I don't know where the treasure is either. Let's follow this little fellow. As he spoke, Ma Yujie released the spirit fox in his hand. The little fellow squeaked and shot towards the starry sky ahead at an extremely fast speed. Ma Yujie followed closely behind the hidden spirit fox the moment he left. Zhuowen sneered in his heart. He dared to conclude that this damned fatty had definitely been to the treasure land. Perhaps he had done something to the treasure land. Therefore, Zhuowen had to be extra careful when following behind this damned fatty. The two of them and the beast were extremely fast as they flashed towards the depths of the waning crescent. Even though there were more starry sky beasts the deeper they went, most of them had been scared away by the spirit fox ahead. Ma Yujie's spirit fox had 7 tails, and its strength was on par with an ordinary cultivator at the 7th step of the void sky realm. It was absolutely one of the top starry sky beasts, and any starry sky beasts that were weaker than the spirit fox wouldn't dare casually challenge the little fellow's authority. Zhuowen followed silently. He noticed that the spirit fox was flashing towards the Sun-Moon Lake that he'd gone to in the past. Zhuowen had gone to the Sun-Moon Lake to find the Sun-Moon grass under the guidance of the Dao Defiance. However, Zhuowen's memory of the faceless white-clothed woman in the Sun-Moon Lake was still fresh in his mind. The white-clothed woman's strength was extremely terrifying and strange. He still felt his scalp go numb when he recalled the scene from that day. Zhuowen's gaze descended onto the fatty in front of him. He noticed that the fatty was slightly nervous as well. It seemed like the fatty had really been here before and had even encountered the white-clothed woman. As they approached the Sun-Moon Lake, Zhuowen noticed that the starry sky beasts had become extremely rare, and there weren't any galaxies or meteorites in the surroundings. All he could see were countless pieces of rubble. Someone had probably intentionally destroyed this place. If Zhuowen knew that it was because of his escape that the white-clothed woman had wantonly destroyed this place, what would he think? Brother Zhuo, we're here. Suddenly, the hidden spirit fox in front of him stopped. It kept squeaking, and its fur stood on end. A purple light flickered in its eyes. Zhuoan looked at the sun-moon lake in the middle of the two continents with a complicated and fearful look in his eyes. Back then, he had been chased by the woman in white until he was in a rather sorry state. If it wasn't for the fact that the infinite ice lotus just happened to restrain the woman in white, he really wouldn't have been able to escape. Brother Zhuo, this little guy sensed that the treasure is nearby. Why don't we split up? Ma Yujie turned around and smiled at Zhuoan. Let's go in together, Zhuoan said meaningfully. However, Ma Yujie said righteously, I'm afraid it's not appropriate to go in together. You have to know that there are two continents here. Moreover, there's a strange lake in the middle of these two continents. If we search together, I'm afraid it'll be a waste of time. It's better to split up, Zhuoan said indifferently. Brother Ma, you don't need to beat around the bush. This place is called the Sun-Moon Lake. I've been here before, and there's nothing on these two continents. Brother Ma should have something that you need me for, right? There's no harm in saying it directly. Ma Yujie's gaze changed, and he smiled awkwardly. Ayo, so Brother Zhuo has been here before. That's really rude of me. It's really my first time here, so I'm a rookie. Brother Zhuo, please don't take offense. Ma Yujie laughed, and then said in a deep voice, I've also heard of the Sun-Moon Lake. It's said that there's a white-clothed female ghost in the lake. For countless years, she's been living in the Sun-Moon Lake. It's said that this white-clothed female ghost is cursed and is forever trapped in the range of the Sun-Moon Lake. Anyone who enters the Sun-Moon Lake will be entangled by this white-clothed female ghost, and their final outcome may be death from fear. Zhuoan nodded. He'd encountered that white-clothed female ghost before. That female ghost was indeed strange. At that time, his attack had no effect on that female ghost, and in the end, it was the everlasting ice lotus that helped him escape. Thinking of the everlasting ice lotus, Zhuoan knew why this damn fatty was looking for him. It turned out that this guy had taken a fancy to the everlasting ice lotus on his body, which could restrain that white-clothed female ghost. Brother Zhuo, this white-clothed female ghost stays in the Sun-Moon Lake all year round, and the humidity is very heavy. If you want to restrain this female ghost, there are only two ways. One is to use an extreme young object to restrain this white-clothed female ghost, and this extreme young object must contain the power of the origin of fire to be effective. Unfortunately, this Ma doesn't have anything that contains the origin of fire. However, there's still another method that Brother Zhuo can help me accomplish. Ma Yujie looked at Zhuoan and laughed mischievously. The origin of ice. Zhuoan said indifferently. Yes, the origin of ice. When water meets cold air, it will condense into ice. That white-clothed female ghost is most afraid of the power of ice, and the origin of ice is the thing that can restrain this female ghost the most. Brother Zhuo has a treasure like the everlasting ice lotus, which can restrain that white-clothed female ghost very much. Before Ma Yujie finished speaking, he was interrupted by Zhuoan. He only saw Zhuoan indifferently look at Ma Yujie, and said, Brother Ma, since you want to use my everlasting ice lotus, but you haven't been honest with me, how do you want me to wholeheartedly help you? Ma Yujie slightly frowned, and in his heart, he secretly cursed Zhuoan for being cunning. However, on his face, he put on a fake smile and said, Brother Zhuo is joking. Although this is my first time coming to the Sun-Moon Lake, I have heard of this Sun-Moon Lake. I want to find a treasure under the Sun-Moon Lake. As long as Brother Zhuo helps me delay that white-clothed female ghost, then we can split the treasure equally. How about it? Zhuoan laughed and said, Brother Ma, your plan is very good. Do you think that I haven't entered the bottom of the Sun-Moon Lake? When I entered the Sun-Moon Lake, I even faced off against that white-clothed female ghost. Moreover, I can clearly tell you that at the bottom of the Sun-Moon Lake, there is nothing else besides the sun-moon grass. As for the treasure you speak of, why didn't I find it at that time? Ma Yujie's eyes slightly narrowed, and he silently looked at Zhuoan. After pondering for a moment, he embarrassedly smiled and said, Brother Zhuo, so you also looked for the sun-moon grass at this place? Actually, it's like this. Just now, I didn't make it clear. The location of the treasure is indeed at the bottom of the Sun-Moon Lake. However, that's only a transmission array. As long as you can activate that transmission array, you should be able to enter the treasure's location. Just now, I didn't make it clear. Brother Zhuo, please forgive me. Zhuoan faintly smiled, and didn't expose the contradictions in Ma Yujie's previous words. Although he still didn't quite believe Ma Yujie's current words, he knew that Ma Yujie's current words should be relatively close to the truth. Since it's a transmission array, why is Brother Ma so certain that the other end of the transmission array must be the location of the treasure? Zhuoan asked. Ma Yujie's gaze was dignified, and he said in a deep voice, that transmission array is unusual. It has existed for an extremely long time. Moreover, it's a one-way transmission array. You must know that generally, one-way transmission arrays are arranged in places where treasures are hidden. This kind of transmission array can only be used once. Chapter 2264. Promoted to 8th level Divine Array. Master Zhuoan nodded and said in a deep voice, since that's the case, Brother Ma, come with me. My everlasting ice lotus should be enough to restrain that white-clothed female ghost. Ma Yujie didn't refuse and said with a chuckle, Brother Zhuo is right. I'll go with you. This little guy will find the location of the transfer array for us. After the two reached an agreement, they rushed into the Sun-Moon Lake together. The water of the Sun-Moon Lake was milky white and emitted a sweet fragrance. Smelling this fragrance, one couldn't help but salivate. The water of the Sun-Moon Lake has a powerful poison. Even if it's an 8th level Void Heaven expert, if they can't resist the temptation of this fragrance and try to drink this water, they will immediately die from the poison. The moment Ma Yujie entered the pool, he sent a message to Zhuo Wen with his divine sense, reminding the latter. Zhuoan didn't reply. Even if Ma Yujie didn't say anything, he knew that this lake wasn't simple. Moreover, this wasn't the first time he entered this place. At that time, he already felt that something was wrong, so he didn't try the water. After entering the lake, the two were silent and vigilant of their surroundings. They were afraid that the white-clothed female ghost would suddenly appear. However, what made the two strange was that when they were about to reach the bottom of the lake, there wasn't the slightest trace of the white-clothed female ghost. When they reached the bottom of the lake, the two looked at each other and revealed a strange expression. The white-clothed female ghost disappeared. Zhuoan whispered with a frown. Ma Yujie also revealed a strange expression. Actually, before he asked Zhuoan for help, he entered the Sun-Moon Lake alone. At that time, he even met the white-clothed female ghost. How long had it been and the white-clothed female ghost disappeared just like that? Could it be that something happened while he was gone? Brother Ma, where is the transfer array? Go there and take a look. Zhuoan said in a deep voice. Ma Yujie nodded and pointed at the hidden spirit fox in his hand. The hidden spirit fox squinted its eyes and let out a squeak before flying out. The water of the Sun-Moon Lake did not pose any resistance to this little fellow. Ma Yujie and Zhuoan followed closely behind. After a while, the hidden spirit fox stopped. Zhuoan looked as far as his eyes could see, and he saw a 30 feet tall pagoda monument standing in front of him. There was a hidden array formation fluctuation around the pagoda stele. Zhuoan carefully sensed it and found that the array formation fluctuation around the pagoda stele should be a type of hidden array formation. However, it had been destroyed by someone. Zhuoan sighed helplessly in his heart. When he had first found the Sun-Moon Lake at the bottom of the lake, he had casually scanned this place. Because he had been too excited when he found the Sun-Moon Lake, he had not carefully investigated this place. He had missed the opportunity to discover this transfer array. Moreover, what Ma Yujie said wasn't wrong. There was indeed a one-way transmission array inside the pagoda monument. Moreover, this transmission array was extremely complex. It wasn't any weaker than the ancient transmission arrays in the star field. From this, it could be seen that this transmission array had been around for a very long time. Ma Yujie came to the side of the stone monument and gently stroked the pagoda stele with his right hand. He said, Brother Zhuo, do you still not believe me now? To be able to spend so much effort on a one-way transmission array, do you think that there wouldn't be a rare treasure on the other side of the transmission array? Zhuoan nodded in agreement. Ma Yujie was right. There was only one purpose for setting up a one-way transmission array, and that was to teleport to a very important place on the other side. It was either a land of treasure or a land of inheritance. Can you activate this one-way transmission array? Zhuowen asked. Ma Yujie nodded, but he was somewhat regretful in his heart. If he had known that the white-clothed female ghost was no longer here, he would not have invited Zhuowen in no matter what. However, now that Zhuowen had followed him to the bottom of the lake, how could he have the nerve to chase him away? Moreover, this damn fatty did not know if there was any danger on the other side of the transmission array. After thinking about it, he still decided to let Zhuowen go in with him. Although Zhuowen's cultivation was only at the Void Sky 6 steps, he knew that this Zhuowen was not simple. Not to mention the infinite ice lotus, with this fatty's intuition, he could feel that this Zhuowen had an even more terrifying power on him. This was also the reason why Ma Yujie enthusiastically invited Zhuowen to go treasure hunting with him when he met Zhuowen at the Yin Yang Yuan Q. Brother Zhuo, don't you know my level of array Dao? Although this one-way transmission array was refined using ancient techniques, with my level, I only need to study it for a period of time to break it. Ma Yujie said proudly. Zhuowen nodded. He didn't doubt the fatty's words. After all, this guy was a level 9 God Array Master. He was much more skilled than Zhuowen. It shouldn't be difficult for him to break this one-way teleportation array. Oh right, Brother Ma, when the time comes, if it really is a treasure land, how will the treasures be distributed? Zhuowen asked casually. Ma Yujie laughed and said, of course it will belong to whoever gets it. It will depend on their own ability. Zhuowen nodded in agreement. He felt that Ma Yujie's plan was not bad. Whether it was him or Ma Yujie, they naturally did not plan to divide it equally. Moreover, they were very confident in themselves, so it would naturally depend on their own ability. Next, Ma Yujie sat cross-legged in front of the pagoda monument. He formed a seal with both hands and took out an array disk that was fluctuating violently. He began to break the array. Zhuowen, on the other hand, stared unblinkingly at the fatty's process of breaking the array. After all, Ma Yujie was a level 9 array Dao master, and Zhuowen's array Dao had reached the pinnacle of level 7. Watching this guy break the array benefited him a lot. 3 days passed in a flash. Ma Yujie was tirelessly breaking the array, while Zhuowen was concentrating on watching. Although it was only 3 days, Zhuowen benefited a lot in these 3 days. One had to know that a level 9 array Dao master breaking the array in front of you was definitely a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for many array Dao masters. Ma Yujie slowly put away the array disk and let out a sigh of relief. He looked at the pagoda monument in front of him with bright eyes. The one-way transmission array was finally broken by him. When Ma Yujie turned to look at Zhuowen, he found that the latter was standing on the spot like a stone statue. Meanwhile, Zhuowen's right hand was like a madman as it began to shake constantly as if he was deducing something. As he continued to deduce, there were extremely terrifying array ripples around him. The ripples were getting stronger and stronger, as if it was a concert that was about to reach its climax. This guy, his array Dao level is actually increasing. Ma Yujie's eyes narrowed. Before he could finish his sentence, the array Dao ripples underwent a qualitative change. In an instant, a terrifying gust of wind swept up in the surroundings and dissipated in all directions. He has advanced to a level 8 array Dao master. This guy. Chapter 2265. Starry Sky Divine Vein. Thinking of this, Ma Yujie couldn't help but admire Zhuowen. This guy's talent in array Dao was indeed powerful. There weren't many people who could have an epiphany while watching others break through the array. Zhuowen opened his eyes and a glimmer of light flashed through them. Soon after, a sliver of joy appeared on his face. He had never expected his array skills to break through to the 8th level at such a time. This had exceeded his expectations. Brother Zhuo, congratulations. You actually made a breakthrough at this critical juncture. This is really beyond my expectations. Ma Yujie smiled insincerely as he cupped his hands and congratulated Zhuorafeng. Zhuowen didn't care. He just cupped his hands and looked at the pagoda steely. Brother Ma, Have you broken through the one-way transmission array? Ma Yujie nodded and smiled. Yes. Brother Zhuo, come with me now. Zhuoan didn't dawdle and came to Ma Yujie's side. Ma Yujie's eyes became serious as he looked at the pagoda stele in front of him. On the front of the pagoda stele, there was a depression. Ma Yujie formed a seal with his right hand and slowly pressed his right hand into the depression on the front of the pagoda stele. Suddenly, a light blue light like a whirlpool spread toward the surface of the pagoda stele. The surface of the pagoda stele emitted a light blue light. Then, a blue whirlpool appeared at the top of the pagoda stele. This whirlpool sank from the top of the pagoda stele and quickly enveloped Zhuoan and Ma Yujie. Zhuoan only felt a terrifying suction force, followed by a feeling of the world spinning. When he opened his eyes, what appeared in front of him was no longer the bottom of the sun-moon pool, but a huge valley. This valley wasn't an ordinary valley. The surface of the valley was dotted with stars, as if it wasn't a valley, but a starry sky. Zhuoan looked at the surrounding valley and felt the rich starry sky energy. He was finally shocked. This was because he found that the entire valley was composed purely of starry sky divine veins. How many starry sky divine veins were needed to form such a huge valley? The starry sky divine veins, as the name implied, were the amalgamation of starry sky energy. They were also the essence of starry sky energy. In the outside world, starry sky divine veins were very rare. Even Zhuoan had only seen a few, but this valley was actually full of starry sky divine veins. Ma Yujie, who was standing next to Zhuoan, reacted immediately. He stomped his right foot and rushed toward the surrounding valleys like crazy. His right hand stretched out and grabbed several starry sky divine veins and put them into his spirit ring. By the time Zhuoan reacted, Ma Yujie had already collected 7 or 8 starry sky spirit veins. This guy, Zhuoan secretly thought that Ma Yujie was cunning. He also formed a giant hand of divine power, pulled out all the surrounding starry sky divine veins, and put them into his spirit ring. Furthermore, Zhuoan felt that it was too slow. He summoned Xiao He and Blood Immortal to help him collect the starry sky god veins. Ma Yujie was even more cunning. He immediately asked the hidden spirit fox next to him to reveal its true form and crazily dig out the starry sky god veins. The hidden spirit fox was originally a treasure hunter. Its digging speed was much faster than Ma Yujie and Zhuoan. Seeing the hidden spirit fox's fast action, Zhuoan frowned. He had to summon the king spirit, Chen Changsheng, and Zhong Ziqing from the Kanglan secret territory. As soon as the 3 of them came out, they were shocked by the number of starry sky god veins in front of them. If Zhuoan hadn't shouted to remind them, they would have been stunned for a while. Besides, Zhuoan also summoned his doppelganger. He didn't care about exposing Devour's true form. With Devour's terrifying devouring power, his speed of collecting the starry sky god veins was much faster than Ma Yujie and the hidden spirit fox. Ma Yujie also saw Devour. His pupils shrank, and he couldn't help but mumble to himself, "It's Devour King. No wonder this guy gives me a dangerous feeling. He has such a trump card." Then, Ma Yujie's fear of Zhuoan increased. At the same time, he was shocked to see Devour devouring speed of the starry sky god veins. Devour only needed to open its mouth to swallow dozens of starry sky god veins. Its speed and efficiency were much higher than his and the hidden spirit fox's. With the help of Zhuoan, the Thunder Fire Sword, the Blood Immortal Sword, and Chen Changsheng, almost 70% of the starry sky god veins in the valley were in Zhuoan's pocket. Ma Yujie, who was confident of winning, only got 30% of the starry sky god veins. After the 2 of them had collected all the starry sky god veins in the valley, the beautiful valley, which was decorated with dots of starlight, was now barren. After Zhuoan collected the starry sky god veins, he let Chen Changsheng and the others enter the Kanglan secret territory again. Ma Yujie came to Zhuoan's side, looking at Zhuoan deeply, and said, "You really can't judge a book by its cover. I didn't expect Brother Zhuo to have such a powerful doppelganger. It seems this Ma has misjudged you." The corners of Zhuoan's mouth curled up, but he didn't answer. He didn't want to talk about Devour. Of course, he had 2 purposes for releasing Devour's doppelganger. First, He wanted to seize the starry sky god veins. The energy in the starry sky god veins was extremely abundant. With the help of these starry sky god veins, Zhuowen could save a lot of time in his cultivation. Although he had just reached the 6th-step void sky realm, with so many starry sky god veins, he had hopes of reaching the peak of the 6th-step void sky realm in a short time. If he had an epiphany, he could even reach the 7th-step void sky realm. For him, the more of such good things, the better. The second reason was the deterrent effect. This Ma Yujie's identity was mysterious, and he was a 9th-grade divine array master. He must have seen a lot, so he naturally knew Devour King. If Ma Yujie knew that Zhuowen's doppelganger was Devour King, it would serve as a deterrent. He was indirectly telling Ma Yujie that he, Zhuowen, wasn't a pushover. Ma Yujie was a smart person. He knew that Zhuowen didn't want to discuss this matter, so he chuckled and said, "Brother Zhuo, this place is indeed a treasure trove. We obtained so many starry sky god veins as soon as we entered. I'm afraid that there are even better things in the depths." Zhuowen nodded and said in a deep voice, "This place seems to be a secret territory. The transmission array is a one-way transmission array. How do we leave this place?" Ma Yujie wasn't worried at all. He said, "Generally, a treasure trove will have a one-way transmission array. We just need to find it here." Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. His gaze fell on the end of the valley, where there was a path of nothingness. This secret territory was very strange. Everything in the surroundings was formed by the starry sky, and this valley was no exception. The path at the end of the valley was also a starry sky path, flickering with specks of starlight. Chapter 2266. Revelation Formation. Let's continue forward. This little guy is starting to get restless. I'm afraid the real treasures are at the end of the starry sky path. The hidden spirit fox in Ma Yujie's palm started to squeak. Its body twisted and turned restlessly. Ma Yujie released his palm. The hidden spirit fox immediately squeaked and turned into a ray of light. It instantly disappeared and rushed toward the starry sky path. Zhuowen and Ma Yujie naturally followed closely behind. Their eyes were filled with eagerness. Of course, other than eagerness, there was also vigilance and alertness. Although they knew that there was likely to be precious treasures at the other end of the starry sky path, they didn't lose their minds. High rewards were often accompanied by high risks. Zhuowen naturally understood this principle, and Ma Yujie was no exception. The two of them walked on the starry sky path at a moderate speed. Even if the hidden spirit fox in front of them was restless and impatient, Ma Yujie forcibly suppressed it and slowed down. About 4 hours later, the two of them were still walking on the starry sky path. On both sides of the path were numerous stars, suns, and moons that stretched as far as the eye could see. It gave people the feeling that they were strolling in the boundless starry sky. Boom! 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 Suddenly, extremely terrifying tremors came from the originally smooth starry sky path. Because the tremors came too suddenly, Zhuowen and Ma Yujie both couldn't stand steadily and almost fell to the ground. "What's going on?" Zhuowen asked with a gloomy expression. "Brother Zhuo, it seems like we're in trouble." Ma Yujie's gaze was gloomy as he looked at both sides of the starry sky path. Zhuowen followed Ma Yujie's gaze and his pupils shrank. He discovered that the stars on both sides of the starry sky path were rushing toward them like rain. Each star represented a star with a terrifying temperature. The temperature of a star was definitely much higher than most flames. Cultivators below the void sky realm would undoubtedly die if they were to be surrounded by a star. Facing so many stars colliding, even a powerful void sky expert would be in danger of dying. "Brother Zhuo, take out the everlasting ice lotus. Otherwise, we'll all die here," Ma Yujie suddenly shouted. Even without Ma Yujie's words, Zhuowen had already brought out the everlasting ice lotus. A crystal-clear ice lotus bloomed from Zhuowen's palm. It then expanded to a size of several tens of meters, protecting Zhuowen and Ma Yujie within its stamen. Since the everlasting ice lotus had been completely refined by Zhuowen, although the ice lotus cold chi was terrifying, It was basically within the range of Zhuowen's control. Naturally, it couldn't hurt Zhuowen and Ma Yujie. Boom. Boom. The moment the everlasting ice lotus was summoned, the first star that came crashing down ruthlessly. The star was like a gigantic fireball that had been magnified countless times. When the star struck the ice lotus, the magma that had been condensed in the star was completely dispersed, gushing out like a flood that had broken through a dam. It was exceptionally terrifying. Can you imagine the scene of a magma larger than the entire planet pouring out? Zhuowen's face was a little ugly. The temperature of the star was just too high. Even the everlasting ice lotus's defense had weakened under the impact just now. Fortunately, the everlasting ice lotus contained the ice origin. Although the everlasting ice lotus had been damaged by the collision of the star, with the ice origin, the everlasting ice lotus could recover very quickly. However, Zhuowen couldn't guarantee that the everlasting ice lotus would be able to withstand the bombardment of a series of stars from behind. Even if the ice origin endowed the everlasting ice lotus with terrifying cold chi and super recovery ability, with so many stars bombarding it at the same time, the everlasting ice lotus might not even be able to recover in time before it was blasted to smithereens. Boom. 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 The moment the first star struck, the following stars bombarded it at an extremely fast speed. The entire everlasting ice lotus began to tremble under the violent bombardment, and countless cracks appeared on the surface of the ice lotus. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He looked at Ma Yujie and said in a deep voice, "The everlasting ice lotus won't last long. Do as you see fit." In addition to the everlasting ice lotus, Zhuowen naturally had other trump cards. However, Zhuowen wasn't the kind of person who liked to suffer losses. This Ma Yujie hadn't done anything yet, so he couldn't let Zhuowen block the surrounding terrifying stars alone. Ma Yujie nodded and immediately took out 81 palm-sized golden array discs from his spirit ring. Immediately after, he waved his sleeve and a terrifying divine sense lingered on the array discs. Blazing golden patterns erupted from the array discs, and immediately, 81 array discs fell around the everlasting ice lotus. Immediately afterward, Zhuowen found that the potential of the ice origin inside the everlasting ice lotus was all forced out by the array discs. The ice lotus, which was originally only a few dozen feet long, at this moment, under the stimulation of the array discs, grew wildly and directly turned into a huge ice lotus that was hundreds of feet long. The cold air gushing out was as thick and huge as an ice dragon. The power of the everlasting ice lotus increased sharply and finally blocked the countless stars outside. Zhuowen, who was inside, could clearly see the stars smashing into the surface of the ice lotus, shattering into countless streams of magma that gushed out in all directions. They were like dazzling fireworks that bloomed with extremely dazzling brilliance. What kind of array is this? Zhuowen looked at the 81 array discs inlaid inside the ice lotus and asked in surprise. This is a revelation array. It can stimulate the most fundamental limit of all power. Your ice origin is already very terrifying, but you are still far from reaching its limit. Now, I am using the revelation array to maximize the power of the ice origin, Ma Yujie said lightly. Zhuowen nodded. Soon after, he looked at the 81 formation discs around him. He knew that this formation should be a Class 9 formation. Even with Zhuowen's level, he was still unable to see through the specific patterns of the formation discs. This showed just how complex and powerful the formation discs were. Although Zhuowen wanted to ask Ma Yujie about the details of the revelation array, after all, this thing was absolutely perfect in combination with the everlasting ice lotus. However, he knew that this array should be an important one on Ma Yujie, and it was unlikely that he would give it to him, so he didn't intend to mention it. The collision of stars lasted for 6 hours and finally came to an end. At this moment, there was no more starlight on both sides of the starry sky path, but only darkness and nothingness. At this moment, the starry sky path was flooded with magma. The path ahead was covered in a thick layer of magma, and the blazing light made people not dare to look at it directly. With the everlasting ice lotus, the magma on the path didn't hinder them too much. After all, the cold air of the everlasting ice lotus was enough to freeze the magma, forming a hard, pitch-black path. The two of them spent another 2 hours and finally reached the end of the starry sky path. At the end of the starry sky path was a huge white arched door. This arched door wasn't closed, but hollow. On the other side of the white arched door was an ordinary cliff, and at the top of the cliff was a bright blood-red color. Chapter 2267. Blood-stained cliff. The moment Zhuowen's gaze fell on the scarlet at the top of the cliff, he felt the blood in his entire body boil. Zhuowen hurriedly suppressed the restlessness of his qi and blood. He noticed that Ma Yujie, who was beside him, was also trembling slightly. Clearly, the latter had also felt the strangeness of the bright red color at the top of the cliff. "That's blood." Ma Yujie narrowed his eyes and muttered in a low voice as if he was sleep-talking. Zhuowen's heart shook. He looked at the blood on the cliff in the distance, and his gaze became a little more dignified. Just as Ma Yujie said, the scarlet on the cliff was blood. This was a blood-stained cliff. However, what shocked Zhuowen was that the blood on the cliff actually gave him such a powerful impact that it actually affected the blood in his body. One must know that with Zhuowen's current strength, he was definitely one of the top experts in the Great Brahma domain. However, Zhuowen only took a glance at the blood-stained cliff just now, and his blood couldn't help but jump, as if it was about to leave his body. He hadn't felt this way for a long time. Just the blood alone could affect experts at his and Ma Yujie's level. Then, just how terrifyingly powerful was the owner of the blood when he was alive? "Let's go in." A rare serious expression appeared on Ma Yujie's face, and he no longer had the sloppy appearance from before. Zhuowen nodded, and the two entered the arched door side by side. As for Ma Yujie's seven-tailed spirit fox, when they arrived, it hid in Ma Yujie's arms and began to tremble. This little guy was extremely excited at the beginning, but now that they had arrived at a treasured land, it was scared instead. Zhuowen found it funny, but this also showed that this was not only a treasured land, but also a place of danger. Boom! The moment Zhuowen and Ma Yujie entered the arched door, their pupils shrank to the size of needles. They only felt an earth-shattering pressure that suddenly crushed their bodies, making it difficult for them to breathe. Under this pressure, Zhuhong contained a peerless killing intent. Terrifying killing intent constantly battered their spirits, as if it wanted to shatter their spirits completely. Zhuowen growled, and the more than 6,000 soul galaxies in his soul operated together. A terrifying divine sense burst out, resisting the killing intent that wanted to drill into his soul like a maggot. Although Zhuowen's soul was terrifying, this killing intent was even more terrifying. It instantly broke through the defense set up by Zhuowen's soul and entered his soul space. Soul kill. Zhuowen's face went grim, and he didn't hesitate in the slightest to execute his soul's secret skill, soul kill. A shapeless divine sense fluctuation was like a tempestuous wave as it fiercely slapped out, and it gave rise to layer upon layer of high waves that carried the might to annihilate the world. The soul-killing technique was indeed powerful. Originally, the killing intent that had smashed into Zhuowen's soul like a hot knife through butter was completely blocked by this soul-killing pole. Even Zhuowen could not help but admire the genius of the faceless woman. She had actually created such a terrifying skill like the soul kills soul. This soul kills soul could definitely be regarded as the most powerful skill of the soul. Only this soul kills soul could exert such a powerful power. This kind of enhancement was not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2, but an exponential increase. Once the soul kills soul was used, Zhuowen's soul would become extremely powerful. Of course, the consumption of the soul kills soul was not small for Zhuowen. However, Zhuowen had the heavenly domain starry sky essence, so he was not afraid of consumption. After barely blocking the soul kills soul, Zhuowen cast a sidelong glance at Ma Yujie beside him. He found that although this damn fatty's face was slightly pale, he was not seriously injured. He knew that this damn fatty's trump card was not weaker than his. Ma Yujie naturally also noticed the safe and sound Zhuowen. He was shocked in his heart. Just now, he had personally experienced how terrifying the soul kills soul was. Even an ordinary powerhouse at the peak of the 7th step of the Void Sky Realm would fall under that soul kills soul. However, except for his pale face, Zhuowen was safe and sound. It could be seen that Zhuowen's soul was not weaker than his. Brother Zhuo, you found it. This soul kills soul is coming from that cliff, Ma Yujie suddenly said. Zhuoan took a deep breath. His gaze fell on the cliff in front of him. To be more precise, his attention fell on the blood-red color at the top of the cliff. This was because he could clearly feel that the soul kills soul was coming from that blood. Whose blood is this? After staining the cliff with blood, it can still erupt with such terrifying soul kills soul kill. This. Zhuoan felt as if he was choking. He was extremely shocked. Ma Yujie also said solemnly, I suspect that the owner of this blood is at least an expert of the two extremes of life and death. He might even be an expert of the Tao affirmation realm. Zhuoan's gaze became even more serious. He had heard the devouring king mention that the two extremes of life and death was the consummate stage of the 9 steps of the void sky. The 9 steps of the void sky had a total of 3 minor stages. They were the life comprehension realm, the death comprehension realm, and the life and death extremes. The life and death extremes were considered consummate stages of the 9 steps of the void sky. It was said that if one wanted to advance from the 9 steps of the void sky to the heaven-crushing realm, one would have to prove one's Tao. Of course, Zhuoan didn't know the specific method of proving one's Tao. After all, he was still very far away from the 9 steps of the void sky, let alone proving one's Tao. However, what surprised Zhuoan was that this damn fatty beside him seemed to know a lot about proving one's Tao. This made Zhuoan even more curious about this fatty's origins. Regardless of whether it's a supreme expert of the two extremes of life and death or a Tao-confirming expert, they are all absolute peak experts. Such experts are actually stained with blood on this cliff. Who did this? Zhuoan asked doubtfully. However, Ma Yujie shook his head and said, I'm not sure. An expert of this level has already surpassed the level that we can come into contact with. However, I know that if such a powerful expert died on this cliff, then this cliff must be extraordinary. But it's also very dangerous, Zhuoan said coldly. Ma Yujie nodded and said calmly, Brother Zhuo, if you're scared, you can stay where you are. In any case, I can't just sit here and wait for death. At the very least, I have to go over and take a look. Moreover, looking at the condition of the cliff, it's obvious that an extremely long time has passed, and the danger has already decreased. After saying this, Ma Yujie ignored Zhuoan and continued forward. Zhuoan couldn't help but chuckle, and he didn't argue with Ma Yujie. Instead, he silently followed behind Ma Yujie. The arched door was only about 500 meters away from the cliff, but Zhuoan and Ma Yujie walked and stopped, and it took them an entire half a day before they finally arrived in front of the cliff. One had to realize that as the two of them continued to approach, the might that emanated from the blood-stained cliff became more and more terrifying. In particular, the killing intent that was mixed within the might was simply too terrifying. Chapter 2268. Blood of a true dragon. Of course, in the midst of such killing intent, Zhuoan did not waste this opportunity. Instead, he silently operated the celestial star meditation diagram, using the terrifying killing intent as a medium to temper his soul. Moreover, the tempering effect of the killing intent was exceptionally good. In just half a day, the number of divine soul galaxies in his soul space had once again increased by about 1,000. In other words, there were more than 7,000 divine soul galaxies in Zhuoan's soul space, and his soul space was much more condensed and powerful than before. Although the killing intent on the blood-stained cliff was more terrifying than before, Zhuoan was not as embarrassed as he was at the beginning. Dealing with this killing intent had become somewhat easy. Not only Zhuoan, but Ma Yujie, the fatty, was also much more comfortable at this time. Obviously, this guy's ability to adapt was not weaker than Zhuoan's. Approaching the cliff, the two found that the front of the cliff was concave inwards. In the concave area, there was a blood pool more than 30 meters in size. Many blood-colored bubbles appeared on the surface of the blood pool, just like the scene after water boiled. Moreover, Zhuoan discovered that the pool of blood did not emit any smell of blood. Instead, it had a refreshing fragrance. It was like the faint fragrance of osmanthus flowers in full bloom. It made people feel relaxed and happy just by smelling it. Zhuoan looked at the blood pool strangely, while Ma Yujie's eyes lit up and he rushed towards the blood pool. Although Zhuoan did not know what this blood pool was, seeing Ma Yujie rush out like a wolf, he naturally did not want to be outdone. This is the blood of a true dragon. Blood that can emit the fragrance of osmanthus flowers. Apart from the blood of a true dragon, I can't think of any other blood that can emit such a fragrance. Ma Yujie came to the side of the blood pool, trembling a little, and immediately took out a jade bottle from his spirit ring, carefully filling it with blood from the blood pool. Zhuoan looked at the excited Ma Yujie in surprise. Compared to this fatty who was experienced and knowledgeable, Zhuoan's knowledge was indeed much shorter. But even if he was not as knowledgeable as Ma Yujie, he knew the value of true dragon blood. The dragon clan was really rare. A long, long time ago, the dragon clan represented power and power. At that time, humans could only look up to the dragon clan. Even the devouring clan was afraid of the dragon clan. In the prosperous era of the dragon clan, the devouring clan was like a mouse. They could only hide in the dark and didn't dare to show up. Of course, only the king of the devouring clan could compare to the dragon clan. However, he could only be compared to an ordinary dragon. If the king of the dragon race were to appear, the devouring king wouldn't even be a match for him. However, as the dragon clan gradually withdrew from the stage of history, the human clan began to grow stronger and became the masters of this starry sky. The cosmos outside the 8 heavens was boundless, many times larger than the 8 heavens. There were even legends that said that the dragon race had left the 8 heavens and entered the cosmos. However, this was just a rumor. Now, everyone knew that as long as one was a void sky cultivator, they had the ability to fly into outer space. However, the cosmos was too big. No void sky cultivator could find a new world in outer space. They could only see abandoned planets in outer space. They were like garbage dumps, dilapidated. One could imagine how precious true dragon blood was for such a powerful dragon clan. You don't plan to take all of the true dragon blood? Zhuoan looked at Ma Yujie, who carefully filled a bottle of true dragon blood and didn't do anything else, and asked in surprise. Ma Yujie was expressionless. He said indifferently, "You can only take 1 bottle of true dragon blood. If you don't believe me, you can try." Zhuoan stared blankly for a moment before taking out 3 jade bottles from his spirit ring in disbelief. He then filled all 3 jade bottles to the brim with true dragon blood. However, when Zhuoan opened the 3 jade bottles again, he discovered that only one of them contained true dragon blood. The other 2 jade bottles were empty. Zhuoan knew that Ma Yujie wasn't lying. He really could only take 1 bottle of true dragon blood. Looks like it was a true dragon that fell here all those years ago. No wonder this blood-stained cliff actually possesses such terrifying pressure and killing intent. Zhuoan put away the true dragon's blood and sighed with emotion. "You're wrong. The blood on the cliff isn't the true dragon's, it's the humans. If I'm not wrong, this true dragon was slaughtered by this person. However, I don't know why this person stained this place with blood." Ma Yujie shook his head. Hearing this, Zhuoan didn't refute. He always felt that this fatty should know something about this place, but this guy didn't tell him the truth. "Brother Zhuo, I'm going to the back to take a look. Do you want to come with me?" Ma Yujie suddenly looked at Zhuoan and asked. Zhuoan shook his head and said, "You go first. I'll wait here for a while." Ma Yujie nodded and walked towards the back of the cliff. Zhuoan followed the blood pool and came to the innermost part of the depression. He raised his head and stared at the sunken cliff in front of him. His eyes became much deeper. He could see that the sunken part of the cliff should have been caused by a giant sword. At the edge of the depression, he saw a deep and bottomless dark abyss. In the abyss, it was dark. Even Zhuoan's divine sense couldn't detect how deep it was. Zhuoan could totally imagine that the divine sword that had pierced the cliff out of the abyss must have been extremely powerful. Rumble. Suddenly, the originally quiet cliff trembled violently. Countless gravel fell from the top of the cliff and the earth shook. Zhuoan stood unsteadily and almost fell into the abyss in front of him. Fortunately, his reaction was fast enough. He immediately took out the king's sword and stabbed it into the cliff in front of him. Zhuowen looked down and was shocked to find that in the depths of the abyss, a pair of faintly discernible eyes exuded a faint blue light, staring straight at Zhuowen. Thump, thump, thump. Suddenly, the dull sound of a heartbeat resounded around the cliff. Zhuowen turned his head abruptly and discovered that the surface of the blood pool behind him was splashing water in all directions. Within the blood pool, a heart that was at least 10 feet in size gradually floated to the surface of the water. Zhuowen's eyes were extremely sharp. He could see at a glance that the surface of the giant heart was actually covered with a dense swarm of red bugs. These bugs were too disgusting. They were grotesquely shaped, and their bodies were covered with blood-red mucus. Moreover, there were many of them. The entire heart was wrapped up by these red bugs, and Zhuowen could only see the outline of the heart. Moreover, every time the heart beat, the terrifying power that erupted from it could kill a large number of the red insects that covered its surface. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.